In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also broadcaster and political commentator Sam Dowler. In a few moments' time, I'll be mucking the week with comedian Diane Spence. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has made it clear that Britain discourages the use of cluster munitions after the United States agreed to send them to Ukraine. President Biden says he stands by his decision despite criticism from human rights groups. Rishi Sunak, who will meet Mr Biden in London on Monday ahead of the NATO summit, says Britain is supporting Kyiv in other ways.
UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine.
Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky has visited Snake Island to mark 500 days of war. The area in the Black Sea was retaken by the Ukrainian army a year ago. Mr. Zelensky is now in Istanbul, holding talks with Turkey's President Erdogan in his first visit to the country since the start of the conflict. Two protests against housing asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset are taking place amid reports that the Bibi Stockholm could arrive later this week. Both Stand Up to Racism Dorset and No to the Barge Group are opposed to plans to house 500 asylum seekers at Portland Port. It's part of the government's plans to reduce costs by moving migrants out of hotel rooms. 686 people crossed the channel yesterday. That's the highest daily number this year. Protesters' organisers Alex Bailey says he will not stop fighting.
To continue our campaign, open letters. We are going to talk to them in person if we can. Next week there is an open council meeting with Dorset Council. We are going to attend. We today then are going to make our voices heard, and the people of Portland, the people of Weymouth and the people of Dorset.
The BBC is reportedly investigating a claim that one of its well-known presenters paid a teenager for explicit pictures. Now, it's alleged that the man paid more than £35,000 for the images, with The Sun saying that the young person was 17 years old. The newspaper says the teen's family complained to the broadcaster in May. In a statement, the BBC said it takes any allegations very seriously and will act on any information that comes to light. The family of an 8-year-old girl who was killed in southwest London have described her as intelligent and cheeky. Selina Lau died after a Land Rover crashed into a prep school in Wimbledon on Thursday. Another 8-year-old girl is in a life-threatening condition, and a woman in her 40s remains in a critical condition. The 46-year-old female driver, arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving, has been bailed pending further inquiries. The Chancellor admits that halving inflation is proving harder than expected. Jeremy Hunt says the Tories' pledge of inflation reaching 5% by the end of the year is going to be more challenging than first thought. Mr Hunt also says tax cuts can't be introduced if it makes the battle against inflation more difficult. Inflation remains currently at 8.7%. The government has released an online video in a bid to stop fly tipping. Well, the tweet from the Prime Minister's official page says it means game over for fly tippers. Bigger on-the-spot fines for litter, graffiti and fly tipping are now in force as part of a crackdown on anti-social behaviour. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, so let's get straight back to Nana.
Good afternoon. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. And it's just gone 5 minutes after 3 o'clock. And it's time now to muck the week. And what a busy one it's been. It started with the celebration of the King's coronation, when thousands of people lined the streets in central Edinburgh this week to watch the People's procession ahead of a national service of thanksgiving and a declaration to mark King Charles III's recent coronation. Now, the King and Queen... It's odd saying that now, isn't it? Queen Camilla. Yes, it is her. And the Prince and Princess of Wales also processed through the city centre. And the honours of Scotland were presented to the King during his service before returning to Edinburgh Castle. Pomp and pageantry. Yes, we do it best here, don't we, in the UK? Well, on the other side of the pond, I bet Harry and Meghan must be kicking themselves after their disastrous attempts to slam the monarchy have all backfired, with rumours of Harry going to Africa and Meghan pursuing her own goals. literally. In the States, things don't seem that rosy in the Montecito mansion. This week also saw the backlash after ITV sank to a new level of wokery, when in the previous week, in a news item about rising water bills, they used a trans woman, a biological man, to represent working mothers. Now, the person they used turned out to be trans activist and militant left-winger Mika Minio Palulelo. Now, it was so bizarre, I mean, that I actually pressed the information button on my remote, wondering if the news had accidentally switched to a documentary about trans rights. Now, named on screen as a Thames Water customer, Mika was dressed rather like a 1950s housewife, complete with a long skirt, updo hairstyle, dangly earrings and nail varnish. As a single mum, I can tell you, I barely had time to get dressed, let alone do my nails. And in a distinctly masculine voice, she complained to the ITN reporter that rising prices were tough if you're a working mum like me, already struggling to get the things that my kid needs. Among the millions of single mothers wrestling with soaring bills. Why, oh why, she's a trans woman, so a biological man, is somehow representative of single mothers. Haven't ITV got enough to deal with? As Sir Keir Starmer talked about how he would rob Peter to pay Paul in his planned private school raid, he thinks that if he charges VAT on private school fees, that he'll have enough money to pay to fix the dire straits the state school system finds itself in. So instead of paying for this improvement to education by attempting to shrink the bloated civil service and fix government waste, he's suggesting shaking the magic money tree of parents who are breaking their backs to afford a better life for their children by taking them out of the broken state school system because they know how bad it is. He talks about oracy being an important skill. Well, I could give him a few words for his plan, but they're all expletives. Private schools do a lot for the community and they save the government money because these parents are paying twice. Another ridiculous plan that won't work and will only result in burdening an already busting state school system. Rishi Sunak, another by-election. They're like rats fleeing the sinking ship, aren't they? I mean, they've done such a bad job, it's actually quite embarrassing. Now, this time, it's Chris Pincher, who many say was the straw that broke the camel's back and led to the fall of Boris. I beg to differ. They blame Boris pretty much everything. Chris groped two people in the Carlton Club whilst he was drunk. He has since apologised, but he is facing an 8-week common suspension. This would trigger a recall petition in his Townsworth constituency, potentially leading to a by-election. The Parliament's Standards Committee said that its completely inappropriate behaviour was an abuse of power. Oh dear, looks to me like another one bites the dust. It's been a mucky old week. So before we get stuck into the debates, here's what's coming up. On the way in the next hour, comedian Diana Spencer will be making light of this week's top stories in Month of the Week. On the way at 3:20, it's climate control. Shell boss Wael Sawan claims that cutting oil and gas production would be irresponsible as green systems aren't developed enough, which I think we all knew, which could save energy bills soaring amid the cost of living crisis. Then stay tuned at 3:35. Can smartwatches really detect early signs of Parkinson's? One study has revealed that these watches can identify the disease 7 years before symptoms surface in people who develop Parkinson's. Could this change the way doctors treat it? We'll be discussing that. Then on the way at 3:50, it's this week's Political Spotlight. I'll be joined by former Labour MP Simon Danczuk to talk about life and his career in politics. That's on the way. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me @gbnews. Right, so joining me now to mock the week is comedian Diana Spencer. You got it right. Before you were Diane Spence, then you were Diana Spencer. It's Diane Spencer.
We got there eventually,
Yeah,
we
we
don't
did.
mind. I would love if they did that during King Charles's coronation,
Oh, God.
sort of reading it out. We'll now present with Charlie. Is it Charlie? Is it Chaz? Chaz? Do we call him King Chaz now? What do you think they
Bless
call
him.
him in Scotland?
I don't know. I wouldn't like to say, actually, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's interesting that. I mean, I I think it's wonderful. I mean, what's your take on it, Scottish people? I mean, there was a bit of booing there.
They were certainly lining the streets. Half of them were cheering, half of them were not. Half of them were waving the placards. I mean, obviously, he's got a connection with Scotland. What I thought was quite interesting, it said, oh, he's going to look forward to spending nearly every summer in Edinburgh. I thought, God, that is duty, isn't it? That is duty to your country. The fact that every single summer you're going to go to Edinburgh. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been to the Fringe Festival, but I went the last time there were bin strikes.
Oh, I remember that.
Oh, oh, it was horrible. I mean, I wonder if that's what Meghan thought. She thought, you know what? I can't spend every summer in Edinburgh. That's it. We're going, Harry. We're going. I can't believe he's going to Africa.
Did she even go to Edinburgh? I don't think she was, there for 14 months?
Has she never been to Edinburgh?
I don't even know. I mean, she only spent 14 months, I think it was, as part of the royal family. I mean, at least spend more time, girl, get to know things and then walk away. I mean, I'd have done at least 3 years on that.
Yeah, you'd have done a proper tour.
I would have.
But she was like, I think she wanted to be tipped. Like, you know, the American way, like every time she did something, she was like, And they're like, no, you are a princess. That is what you get. But never mind.
She didn't realise she didn't actually need money. They didn't need money, but she thought that she'd go on this mystery tour, this worldwide privacy tour, which hasn't ended very well at all. Do you think it's sort of the way they're going now? They're going to end up broke, Harry and Meghan?
Harry and Meghan, I mean, I don't know if they get to keep their money for the things that they've been paid for that they haven't produced. Like, is it some kind of prenup that they've had with, you know, Spotify and Netflix, where it's like, oh, we'll give you the money, oh, you gave us nothing, oh, you keep all
No, I think they didn't get all the money. No, they didn't get all the money. So I have a sneaky suspicion that they'll be back cap in hand, at least he will, which will be quite sad, but in a way slightly funny. Now, what do you think of this ITV business? Now, I mean, look, I like to watch all the news channels. I watch all of them just to get a good view on what everyone's saying. Obviously, I've got GBNews on all the time, but I always look at BBC ITV just to see what they're saying. And I remember watching this News at 10 feature and thinking, what is this? I actually pressed my remote to check. Are we still in the news?
Yeah,
what is that about?
You had a proper Matrix moment, didn't you, where you were like, I'm sure this doesn't make sense.
No.
Well, I think the thing that's really annoying is that trans women seem to be jumping the queue. It's like there are a whole nation of biological women who could have done that news piece, but for some reason the trans woman is like, out of the way, and is just like sauntered to the front of the queue. And it's like, well, I'm not saying that we're all like trying to get into the position, oh, I'm struggling. Like, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that in lots of these areas, we're seeing trans women kind of elevated to the status of this represents a woman, this represents a mum. And it's like, whoa, because what I have noticed is some trans women also seem to celebrate being a woman, like you would get a sports badge. They're like, I've been a woman for 100 metres, get me a badge. And it's like, I've never seen such a needy group of people. It's like they need us all to go, oh, you're such a brave woman, you're so brave. And it's like, do you know what? Grow up. Part of being a woman is just getting on with it and doing things when nobody acknowledges that you've done it.
Well, that's why you know they're clearly men.
Because they want to be praised for everything.
Honestly, you know, like women, we don't go on about, oh, you know, like, we've got breastfeeding and this and that, and look at us. I mean, there was that image, of course, that she put out there. I mean, even it pains me to say that, but she put this image out there of her breastfeeding this baby, and obviously we know that, yes, a man can lactate. I read a piece in the Daily Mail on Friday, which was all about this particular woman, and it turns out that she's a trans activist as well. So, you know, they've got somebody who's a trans activist and also an active member of, I think, the civil service or something. Not even, you know...
It's like they went out of their way.
To find somebody who
ITV
did not represent women.
No, single mum, trans activists, yes. Like, I mean, maybe because of the Philip Schofield thing, maybe ITV are like, we've got to do something.
But not that. That just makes it worse. Everyone's looking at them going, what planet and reality do you live in? Where a woman, as a single mum, puts on heels and, like, this nice outfit and all that to do all the washing and the... No, we can barely... Look, as a single mother, I know. I literally, when I'm dropping my kids off, I look like a clown.
Did you see...
I do.
You never look like a clown.
I do, literally.
Did you see the photo? There was another photo where the same person, the Mika person, was literally saying, oh, I've just been shopping for nipple clamps.
I know.
And I was like, please stop. Like, this is now too much for me. These layers are just too horrible. And I think ITV made a really bad choice because it just takes away from
Well, the issue, and the issue they were talking about, which was about the rising water prices.
Yeah, it was about
We've
water
totally
prices.
forgot about it.
We're not even talking about that now.
Now, what about Rishi Sunak? He's losing everybody. Chris Pincher groped somebody.
Yeah, what I don't get is Chris Pincher groped somebody. He gets 8 weeks off. That's a summer holiday.
He's getting paid for that, I presume, as well. Presumably he's being paid. I don't know, but I'm presuming that he will be paid.
Well, yeah, he gets 8 weeks off. I mean, in that time, what's he going to do? He's probably going to go to the theatre, he's going to write some musicals, he's going to go to, you know, a couple of clubs. And I'm just like, well, that's not fair. Like, you should be made to do extra hours. Surely when you get punished for doing something wrong, you should actually make up your punishment. And, of course, yeah, it's going to put Rishi on the back foot because of all these by-elections, and Chris Pincher was the one that unsteadied Boris, because the way Boris handled it, then everybody started jumping ship.
Well, it's literally, I mean, I think it was a bit unfair. Everything was blamed on Boris, even somebody who can't control their hands. That's not Boris's fault.
No.
What do you think, finally, Keir Starmer and his idea that what he's going to do is he's going to take money out of the private school sector, or from the parents who are working really hard to send their kids to these schools, to pay for the public school sector?
This is why we need cash in our society, because I am fed up of them saying we're going to take money out of here and put it to there, because they take money out of here and then it goes somewhere that we don't know. At least if we had cash, they should turn up to the private school, go put the cash in there, and then take the taxi, take an Uber round to all the state schools. Here you go. Set up a direct debit.
Set up a direct debit. Diana Spencer, thank you very much. I called you Diana, just on purpose. When are you back? You're on Headliners soon, aren't you?
No, I am on Free Speech Nation tomorrow with the lovely Andrew.
Free Speech Nation, make sure you join her at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Here on GB News on a Sunday. That, of course, is Diane Spencer. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, still to come at 3:35. Can smartwatches really detect early signs of Parkinson's? One study has revealed these watches can. Yes, they could help detect symptoms 7 years before the actual disease occurs. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers and thunderstorms in the forecast through the rest of this weekend, though there will be some warm, if not hot, spells of sunshine in between. And looking at the bigger picture, low pressure sits to the west of the UK. It's drawing in that hot and humid air from the near continent, allowing those shower clouds to develop, thunderstorms, some localised disruption possible over the coming days. Looking at the rest of Saturday, we can see those thundery showers pushing north across parts of England into Scotland, merging to give some longer spells of heavy rain. Some localised flooding is possible, but then clearer skies follow behind. Most places dry to end the night. Temperatures, though, quite uncomfortable for sleeping, particularly in the east, 17 or 18 degrees as a minimum, a little fresher across the west. So bright start for many, though rain still clearing northern Scotland, and another area of heavy rain, perhaps thundery as well, pushes into southeast England. And then generally for most, it's a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. Showers most frequent across western parts of the UK, particularly Northern Ireland, Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some thunderstorms developing here. Hail, gusty winds, some localised flooding is possible. So do take care. And temperatures on the warm side, but a little lower than Saturday. Those thundery showers continue to push north through the evening, so we could see some localised disruption before these clear and ease away as we head into the early hours. So again, for many, it will be a dry night with plenty of clear skies, but it will keep temperatures up despite this, 14 or 15 degrees as a minimum temperature across parts of England and Wales, a little cooler across Scotland where we have a little more cloud and rain. So it means a sunny start to Monday for many of us, though we do have rain clearing northern Scotland once again, and then further showery rain starting to push in from the west as we move through the day, and it turns more unsettled Tuesday and Wednesday, heavy and thundery showers, temperatures starting to feel fresher.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, so this is GB News. Welcome if you just joined me. It's just coming up to 21 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Up next, climate control. Shell boss Val Sawan claims that cutting oil and gas production would be irresponsible as gas systems aren't developed enough as the government jumps the gun on its green agenda. That's on the way after this. Just coming up to 24 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, Shell boss Val Sawan claims that cutting oil and gas production would be irresponsible as the switch to renewable energy isn't happening fast enough. He's also said that he wouldn't be economically viable during the cost of living crisis, as it could cause energy bills to soar even further. Now, this all comes as the world saw the hottest recorded temperature earlier this week. So what do you think? Should the government cut oil and gas production to help climate change, or will it just make the poorest people in society even poorer? Or is it even relevant? Will it even work? Right, so joining me to discuss, Brian Catt, he's an engineer and physicist, and also Sean Irish, he's there from Just Stop Oil, he's a spokesperson. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Brian Catt. Okay, I don't know what he's doing.
Hi.
All right, Brian. OK, Brian, so the Shell boss has said that we shouldn't do this, it's irresponsible. Talk to me about where you stand with it.
Well, it is totally irresponsible. The world depends on fossil fuels for most of its energy. About 85% of total world energy use is fossil fuels. Even in the UK, it's 73%. And there's no way you can transition to renewables because there isn't enough renewable energy to replace that. So what are you going to transition to? Nuclear? Well, they're not planning to build a lot of that anytime soon. So it's a complete nonsense to say we must transition when we haven't got anything to transition to. That means shutting down the economy and going back to medieval times, basically. Oh, by the way, it's not the hottest week it's ever been. It was a lot warmer every summer during the Egyptian and Roman periods, 2 degrees warmer than now. So that's complete nonsense.
Oh, well, we'll check our sources, but thank you for that. Sean Irish, Just Stop Oil.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Nana. So, yeah, we are from Just Stop Oil. We're demanding that the UK government end new fossil fuel licences. And, you know, Brian is to an extent correct. The UK government at the moment isn't putting in the replacements that we need. That is why we are demanding that they do so. At the moment, the UK government is investing more into fossil fuels. Just Rosebank alone will completely destroy our climate targets. You know, Brian is a scientist, or so I've heard. Has he published any accredited papers since his career started in 1980?
Brian, he asked you, have you published any accredited papers?
Sorry, yes, I have. They're out there on the web. One on energy and one on the volcanism and its effects on the interglacial period, which we're currently in.
Well, he has, Sean. So there you go. Listen,
and before that, there's an earlier one. Let's just 1968. I also published a paper on radiation physics, health physics, radiation protection. But I've been in industry most of the time, and what you don't do in industry is publish papers telling your competition what you're doing.
OK, fair enough. So he's answered your question, Sean. Look, Sean, it's laudable aim. Nobody's disagreeing with your aim, but hasn't the boss of Shell got a point that what you're pushing for and why you're pushing for it in this way, we're already going there anyway, but as fast as we can. But if we go too quickly, it won't be beneficial to anybody. We're not going to do it. It's not going to work.
Well, I think Shell has a vested interest in making sure we stay away from the fossil fuel, or stay with fossil fuels. Of course, he's currently right. Again, the UK government is not investing as it should in renewables. The UK government is signed up to the Energy Charter, which means any money that the fossil fuel industry loses will be matched with taxpayers' money. And that is completely wrong. We need to be incentivising the free market by pulling away from these deals and actually allowing green energy to survive and thrive. We should be allowing companies to use the fossil fuel industry, or use renewables at the market rate, which means pulling out of these things. Wind, tide, solar, these are all cheaper, 2 to 3 times cheaper currently at the moment, 9 times cheaper at the height of the energy crisis. If we pulled away from these things and actually let the free market decide, then we would be in a much better place than currently what we've got.
Brian.
Well, that is, of course, rubbish. The cheapest by far, or cheapest by a reasonable margin of lifetime cost is nuclear, well known. All you do is go to the IEA and look at their regularly published every 5 years review of the cost of energy. And the only thing you can replace fossil use with, the 73% that even we have in the UK, is with nuclear, because renewables are simply not, there's not enough energy in renewables to actually provide the energy we need currently, never 330 terawatt hours, never mind the powering cars and heating homes. There just isn't enough energy. So, and it's more expensive, by the way. Definitely, that's to say that what I said in the beginning, go and look at the actual numbers. They're just cherry picking. If you look at the actual cost, the best thing to do with all this is to let the market decide, as he says, take all subsidies away from everything. If people have to borrow money up front, as you do with nuclear, because it's quite expensive to build one, but then it runs for 60 years for next to nothing, then you might have to balance out the fiscal equation, but no actual subsidy at all. Then let the market decide.
I think you make an interesting point, but the majority of climate scientists disagree with you. The IPCC reports disagree with you. The United Nations disagrees with you. The International Energy Agency disagrees with you. You know, we are saying these are saying that we need to immediately invest and start getting into renewable energy. That is a given. Even if we started with nuclear now, you're a nuclear physicist. You know yourself. From planning to building is about 20 years, and then from build to another 20 years is what it takes to go carbon neutral. We haven't got that type of time. We have got time to build windmills.
Brian a chance to respond to what you said. Briefly, Brian, you got about 20 seconds.
OK, well, it takes 7 years to build a nuclear power station. The IPCC have no remit to talk about energy. They don't understand it. And just saying we should do it when it can't work is bonkers. You don't go and do something which you know is economic suicide.
Do you accept that we're in a climate crisis?
No, there is no climate crisis. I suggest you look at the Clinton Declaration. You might understand a bit more about it.
OK, so you disagree with the IPCC, the majority of scientists. So I think that's a good, it's good to know where you're coming from, that you disagree with science.
Well, you do.
I belong to a group of 1,500 scientists who absolutely disagree with this because it's not wrong. It doesn't stack up. There's no evidence to support the claims of the IPCC. It's all made in models, not real.
Well, can I just very briefly ask you then, Sean, are you happy with the fact that one of the things they're suggesting was to build a load of pylons, over 100 miles worth of pylons, to support the whole idea of electricity and everything powered by electricity? I mean, surely that's damaging to the environment.
Pylons have to be built to supply energy anyway, regardless of what form of energy you use. Well, not the hundreds of miles that they're offering to do that. I mean, surely that's quite detrimental to the environment. I mean, are you comfortable with that? I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, Nana. So
last week, then, in the papers, they were saying, basically, Keir Starmer, one of his plans was they're going to have hundreds of miles of pylons. Brian, is pylons...
We've got hundreds and thousands of miles.
No, it was hundreds. I didn't say thousands.
No, but we've already got thousands of miles of pylons.
Yeah, well, they're going to put some more up to support your idea of this energy. Brian, briefly to you.
You have to triple. If you wanted to electrify transport, well, not lorries, because that really doesn't work. If you wanted to electrify most transport and heating, then you would have to triple the electricity supply in the UK. To do that, you'd have to build 3 times as much grid capacity, and that's not just the pylons. They'd have to dig up the whole of the built environment, pull out all the transformers that are in people's back gardens and around the place, up on poles in the country. Everything has to be 3 times bigger: the transformers, the underground cables in cities, and the pylons.
Well, listen, none of it sounds realistic. Brian Catt, thank you very much. Engineering physicist, and also Sean Irish from Just Stop Oil. Thank you so much. This is GB News. On the way, political spotlight. I'll be joined by former Labour MP Simon Danczuk to talk about his life and career in politics. Stay tuned, but first let's get your latest news headlines.
3:31, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. And our top story this hour, the Prime Minister has made it clear that Britain discourages the use of cluster munitions after the United States agreed to send them to Ukraine. President Biden says he stands by his decision, despite criticism from human rights groups. Rishi Sunak, who will meet Mr Biden in London on Monday ahead of the NATO summit, says Britain is supporting Kyiv in other ways.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine.
Demonstrators have been protesting against plans to house asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset. It follows reports that the Bibby Stockholm, which can accommodate 500 people, could arrive this week. Both Stand Up to Racism Dorset and No to the Barge Group don't want it moored at Portland Port. It's part of the government's plan to reduce costs by moving migrants out of hotel rooms. The BBC is reportedly investigating a claim that one of its well-known presenters paid a teenager for explicit pictures. It's alleged that the man paid more than £35,000 for the images, with The Sun saying that the young person was 17 years old. In a statement, the BBC said it takes any allegations very seriously and will act on any information that comes to light. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now let's get straight back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 34 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. On the way, political spotlight. I'll be joined by former Labour MP Simon Danstrup to talk about his life and career in politics. That's coming up. Welcome back. 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app and check out all the programmes here on the channel. Now, Portland locals continue to voice their anger at a plan to house asylum seekers on their doorstep. Two protests are taking place on the same day, with residents fearing the conditions on the migrant barge are inadequate. Now, one community group thinks the barge might have a negative impact on local services. The Bibi Stockholm, which a lot of people have been talking about now, it's going to house 500 illegal immigrants, and it could arrive as early as this weekend, and that comes after a record 686 people crossed the channel in small boats yesterday, so it shows no sign of abating. That brings the total for this year to more than 12,000 already. So joining me now is GB News South West of England reporter Jeff Moody. Jeff, you are there. Oh gosh, it's raining badly. Have the protesters dispersed? I bet they have. First sign of rain out of there.
Yes, they have. They have dispersed. There is nobody complaining right now. But a couple of hours ago, things were very tense. They were very angry on both sides of the argument. The BBC Stockholm at the moment is still in Falmouth. The Home Office is being very cagey about when the move will take place, but it is expected to be in the next couple of days. We know that the barge is now out of the dry dock and it's into a wet dock, which means that the refurbishments have been done and it is ready to arrive here in Portland. So they're expecting it over the next couple of days. The welcome they'll receive isn't going to be too friendly in places. There were two rival marches. I hope you can hear me under all of this rain. It really is bad. There were two rival marches going on today. Firstly, there's the No to the Barge side. Now, No to the Barge say that there's a couple of reasons why they don't want the barge here. Firstly, they say, well, look, there's going to be 500 young men on their own, away from home, with a free pass into Portland and into Weymouth. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what they're capable of. We don't know what criminal record they have, if any. We don't know anything about them. And so that in itself is a concern. Secondly, people say, well, look, we are in the middle of a huge cost of living crisis, which has bitten particularly hard down here in Portland. It's not a particularly wealthy area, and public services are really stretched to the limit. There are 2 GPs, and some people are saying, well, you know, they haven't been able to get an appointment for months and months and months, and then suddenly they're reading about all of these benefits that these asylum seekers will get, including free healthcare and all sorts of other things, and they're saying, look, it's just not fair. But then there's the other side that they're saying they're the stand up to racism side, who are saying, well, look, we don't want the barge here either, but our reasons are different. We think that it is inhumane to put 2 to 3 asylum seekers into one room the size of a prison cell. They call it the prison barge. They say that these people have fled persecution and that they should be welcomed with open arms. And they accuse the other side of being racist. And that's the problem. And that's the sad thing about it, that this divides communities. We saw it in Newquay, where I reported quite extensively when the Beresford Hotel in Newquay was open to asylum seekers, and it really divided the community. It divided the people into those that supported and those that didn't. And the rhetoric from the two sides became more and more heated as time went on, and that's the danger here. That people are saying they don't want the barge, but then they're calling each other racist, they're calling each other fascists, and they're not actually getting to the nub of the argument. And a lot of people expressed to me what a shame it was today that the two marches wanting the same outcome couldn't march together, how they had to have two distinct sides. And I think that is what this situation does. It forces a divide amongst communities, amongst friends. Portland is not a particularly diverse place. In fact, it's not a diverse place at all. So suddenly adding 500 people from a different community, a different culture into that mix is going to cause problems at the best of times. Now it's a case of, well, they're definitely coming. The barge will be here in the next couple of days. How the local residents react when there are 500 young men wandering the streets, we don't know, but we'll soon find out.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because basically neither of them want the barge, but one side wants to make themselves sound nice about not wanting the barge, and the other side are just being honest about it. Listen, thank you so much. It's really good to talk to you, Jeff. Good to speak to you. That's Jeff Moody. He's there with regard to the BBC Stockholm. He's there in Portland. Interesting. Right, well, stay tuned. Now, this story really caught my eye, and I wanted to share it with you because according to a study by the UK Dementia Research Institute at Cardiff University, smartwatches, of which I don't have, can identify Parkinson's 7 years before symptoms surface in people who develop the disease. So there was a trial. Over 100,000 people took part with these watches, and they were able to detect that people's movements during light activity slowed down before diagnosis, and that includes tasks like making the bed or cleaning. Now, although smartwatches cannot predict who will get Parkinson's, it can help to identify those who are more at risk of the disease. That's interesting. So joining me now to discuss is Dr. Rafid Al-Mafouda. So, Dr. Rafid, talk to me about this then. So, because I slow down if I'm making the bed, if I'm exhausted, like today I did my heat yoga, I get home, I'm exhausted, I'm going to make the bed more slowly. How can the smartwatch work that out? I don't understand.
Well, I think you raise good afternoon, first of all, but I think you raise a very good point in that what you've read as an article is describing a screening tool. So in medicine, we generally have multiple types of investigations, and some of these investigations are aimed at populations and aimed at screening. So what they should be is sensitive to picking up a potential problem, but they're not necessarily specific in diagnosing what the actual problem is. So in this case, and in this study, as you've mentioned briefly, is a reliance on smartwatches, which obviously is exciting. That there's a new technology which is being used in medicine in this way. And the smartwatches are analyzing gait. So I guess that's a specific example, a specific measurement which probably differentiates what you've mentioned as being tired overall. So it's analyzing gait, and the type of gait analysis will be looking at the speed of acceleration, the time, the swing time, and the step length. So there's specific parameters within gait which are being analyzed. And when then that is, with the use of AI and modeling, what the study group have aimed to do is diagnose which patients have Parkinson's or are at risk of developing Parkinson's. And Parkinson's, just for the viewers, is fairly common amongst the neurodegenerative diseases, which means diseases which develop with time in some patients. Possibly 1 in 37 is estimated as in the UK may develop some form of Parkinson's, where the cells degenerate or die in the nervous system, and these are specific cells which do or responsible for specific fine-tuning of movement. And when those neurotransmitters are lost, then certain symptoms become apparent. And in the case of Parkinson's, those symptoms will include things like stiffness, or in what we in medical terms will use is bradykinesia, which means slowness of movement. In addition to tremor, those are pretty much the hallmarks of Parkinson's disease clinically. And the aim of this watch is to provide a diagnostic tool for that. So as you said, there was roughly over around 100,000 people involved. The study arm, in terms of number of patients with Parkinson's, is not a large number overall. It's around 100 to 150. So I think they had 2 arms within that study where it did correlate, the data that they had did correlate with a problem with gait in patients who had Parkinson's, and as you said, patients who then went on to develop Parkinson's. So I guess what it does provide is an exciting possible screening tool. And I think smartwatches, which I think, to put the conversation a bit wider with AI, may provide populations or population-based screening tools to pick things up. Not just Parkinson's, it could be stroke, it could be many other things, looking at vital signs, etc. So I think there's definitely something in this for the future of medicine. But for specific studies, as we've just mentioned.
But Dr. Rafiq, once they've discovered it and they think, OK, so you're susceptible, it's likely to be you, is there anything to help you? Because I don't know whether I'd want to know 7 years earlier if I'm going to find out that I'm going to get this thing later on. But I just found out 7 years earlier, but there's nothing there to actually help me. Is there anything there now? Has the treatment progressed with the condition?
I think it's another fair point. But in general, any management, even when there's no cure, between inverted commas, if you like, for a condition, there will be management options, and they may be to help the symptoms of. Moreover, with these type of conditions, because it's generally a very gradual, slow process, it may be very late down the line when a specific reason is diagnosed, which can lead to difficulties, social difficulties, an effect on quality of life, non-recognition, etc. So it's reintroduced.
So there is potential to sort of help people if you do find out you've got it before. Listen, we're running out of time, Dr. Rafiq. Very good
exactly right.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Rafid Al-Mufada. Thank you very much. He's a consultant neurosurgeon and complex spine surgeon. Wow, he must be a very clever man. I'd like to know stuff like that, but I think that's gone. It's gone. I'm never going to be that clever. Right. Well, listen, I'm very excited to announce that it's time for Political Spotlight. And I'm joined by a former Labour MP. His name is Simon Danstrup. I hope I've said that right. He was elected in 2010 to represent the constituency of Rochdale under Gordon Brown. He's got considerably more hair in that picture than he does here. Sorry about that, Simon. I just thought, who is that? Is that the same person? Is it the same? Oh, there he is. Even more hair there. I can talk under this. I'm bald, Simon. I'll tell you that now. Now, Simon served as the Labour MP for Rochdale for over 7 years. He's most notable for spearheading an investigation into historical allegations of child abuse against politicians. He even wrote an exposé entitled Smile for the Camera, the double life of Cyril Smith. For his efforts, he was awarded a Campaigner of the Year. Well, I'm pleased to say that Simon, as you know, joins me now. Simon, thank you very much.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Simon, let's talk about you then, your political career. Why did you get into politics?
Yeah, I come from a very poor one-parent family, so social justice was always very important for me. My grandmother, although not in politics, used to talk a lot about politics. So that first piqued my interest, and it went from there, really. I attended my first Labour Party meeting when I was 15 in Padiham in Lancashire. That put me off, actually.
Did it?
Yeah, truly awful meeting.
Not surprised then you joined them. What the hell's going on?
Well, and then, but I joined 5 years later, and then became a councillor when I was 27, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So how have you found the whole political scene at the moment? We're hearing things like there's a lot of. So you'll go to Westminster, you'll spend time in Westminster. We're hearing a lot of women complaining about the environment in Westminster. Is it really as male charged and toxic as the women are saying? A lot of women are saying that they felt that there was a lot of people touching and doing all sorts of things. Is that
Westminster's a peculiar workplace? There's no doubt about that. I didn't enjoy working in Parliament particularly. I'd come from a business background, which is quite unusual for a Labour MP, and I'm not overly partisan, so I did find it difficult. I like to make decisions based on what I think is best for the country, rather than what I think is best for the Labour Party. So I was very critical of Ed Miliband and very extremely critical of Jeremy Corbyn. The Financial Times described me as his fiercest critic. So that didn't win me any favours in Westminster or within the Labour Party. And it is a strange working environment. I think it needs radical reform, to be quite honest.
I think it does as well. One of the things that strikes me is the big sort of holiday type thing, the 6 weeks off or however long it is that people get in the summer or coming up to the recess. Do you think that's something that we should be carrying on doing now, or do you think MPs should just get on with the job?
Yeah, I think it should be more like a conventional business or workplace. I think the hours are peculiar. They should be more conventional, 9 till 5 sort of hours. And you're right to say, going into recess, while some MPs will get back to the constituencies and work heavily, some clearly don't. So if you do the job properly as a Member of Parliament, like I like to think I did, then it's a very arduous job and, really taxing, but very rewarding. But if you don't do it properly, then you can be quite laid back and not do very much.
It's interesting that a lot of politicians come to politics, especially with the new sort of generation of people that are entering it, without actually having done any real other things beforehand. Well, what did you do before you came into it?
Yeah, so I'd left school at 16 with no real qualifications, worked in a factory for several years and went to college at night, gained the qualifications I should have got when I was at school, and then I went and did a degree as a mature student and carried on working whilst I got the degree, and then I did a degree in sociology, which I thoroughly enjoy, and then I eventually set up a market research and communications agency based in Manchester and did that for several years. But unusual for a Labour MP to be in business,
Yeah, it does seem it. And looking at the Labour Party now, do you obviously you're going to say positive things about them, but I like the fact that you've admitted that when there were leaders that you didn't particularly think were worthy, and for me, I didn't think Jeremy Corbyn was particularly good either. Everyone voted, I think, because of him, people voted for the Conservative Party, even if they didn't really want to. What would you say as you look at the Labour Party under Sir Keir Starmer's leadership?
I left the Labour Party in 2017 because of Jeremy Corbyn, so I resigned from the Labour Party. Keir's a nice guy. I know him. is not my kind of politics. I'm sort of traditional Labour politics. Keir is sort of soft left, I would describe him as. That whole North London sort of Labour Party, which I don't really buy into. So I haven't decided how I will vote at the next general election. I think they need a stronger leader. David Miliband would have always been the best.
He was. Why did they pick Ed? It's like, pick the better-looking one. Yeah. Not being horrible, David. He's a nice-looking chap, but... You know, when you know how people are quite fickle, aren't they? So he had a more Tony Blair-like charisma about it, didn't he? Why did they pick Ed?
Well, it's just a big mistake. David should have run a stronger and harder campaign. I think he thought he had it in the bag. But his brother, quite a bizarre situation where brothers are running against each other, pipped him at the post. But that, from there on in, the Labour Party really has faced challenges and problems. And I don't think they've got it in the bag at the next general election,
I was about to ask you that, yeah. Do you think the Tories could if Rishi Sunak, because he's going on a steady path, it's steady, even though he's, you know, not much charisma, he's going steadily forward?
Yes, I think he is, and whilst he doesn't excite everybody, he's not Boris Johnson, is he? He is quite managerial, but he's very focused on delivering for the people, and I think that will be appreciated. And I think some of the policies that Keir's coming forward with, that North London approach on banning oil exploration in the North Sea, etc., I think are big mistakes. I think it could be quite dangerous.
Well, listen, Simon, I would talk to you forever and talk to you for ages on that, but we're running out of time. That's Simon Danchuk. He is a Labour MP. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and digital radio. More to come in the next hour.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers and thunderstorms in the forecast through the rest of this weekend, though there will be some warm, if not hot, spells of sunshine in between. And looking at the bigger picture, low pressure sits to the west of the UK. It's drawing in that hot and humid air from the near continent, allowing those shower clouds to develop, thunderstorms, some localised disruption possible over the coming days. Looking at the rest of Saturday, we can see those thundery showers pushing north across parts of England into Scotland, merging to give some longer spells of heavy rain. Some localised flooding is possible, but then clearer skies follow behind. Most places dry to end the night. Temperatures, though, quite uncomfortable for sleeping, particularly in the east, 17 or 18 degrees as a minimum, a little fresher across the west. So a bright start for many, though rain still clearing northern Scotland, and another area of heavy rain, perhaps thundery as well, pushes into southeast England. And then generally for most, it's a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. Showers most frequent across western parts of the UK, particularly Northern Ireland, Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some thunderstorms developing here. Hail, gusty winds, some localised flooding is possible. So do take care. And temperatures on the warm side, but a little lower than Saturday. Those thundery showers continue to push north through the evening, so we could see some localised disruption before these clear and ease away as we head into the early hours. So again, for many, it will be a dry night with plenty of clear skies, but it will keep temperatures up despite this, 14 or 15 degrees as a minimum temperature across parts of England and Wales, a little cooler across Scotland where we have a little more cloud and rain. So it means a sunny start to Monday for many of us, though we do have rain clearing northern Scotland once again, and then further showery rain starting to push in from the west as we move through the day, and it turns more unsettled Tuesday and Wednesday, heavy and thundery showers, temperatures starting to feel fresher.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Are we on the brink of a breakthrough for Alzheimer's? A momentous drug has given one family hope after David, his son, developed the disease 7 years ago. I'll be joined by David and his wife, who will share their story. All that is on the way. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Stay tuned, there's loads more in the next hour. Hello and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Oh, look, no, get out of her shot. And political commentator Sam Dowler. You get everywhere. Half you was in my shot, then you were in there.
I think I'm in the wrong place.
I don't know what you're doing. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 4:01. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. And our top story this hour, the Prime Minister says Britain discourages the use of cluster munitions after the United States agreed to send them to Ukraine. President Biden says he stands by his decision, despite criticism from human rights groups. Rishi Sunak, who will meet Mr Biden in London on Monday ahead of the NATO summit, says Britain is supporting Kyiv in other ways.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine.
Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky has visited Snake Island to mark 500 days of war. The area in the Black Sea was retaken by Ukrainian armed forces a year ago. Mr Zelensky is now in Istanbul, holding talks with Turkey's President Erdogan in his first visit to the country since the start of the conflict. Demonstrators have been protesting against plans to house asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset. It follows reports that the Bibby Stockholm, which can accommodate 500 people, could arrive this week. Both Stand Up to Racism, Dorset, and No to the Barge Group do not want it moored at Portland Port. It's part of the government's plan to reduce costs by moving migrants out of hotel rooms. No to the Barge Group organiser Alex Bailey says he won't stop fighting.
To continue our campaign, open letters. We are going to talk to them in person if we can. Next week, there is an open council meeting with Dorset Council. We are going to attend. We today, then, are going to make our voices heard, and the people of Portland, the people of Weymouth, and the people of Dorset.
The BBC is reportedly investigating a claim that one of its well-known presenters paid a teenager for explicit pictures. It's alleged that the man paid more than £35,000 for the images, with The Sun saying that the young person was 17 years old. The newspaper says the teen's family complained to the broadcaster in May. In a statement, the BBC said it takes any allegations very seriously and will act on any information that comes to light. The family of an 8-year-old girl who was killed in southwest London have described her as intelligent and cheeky. Selina Lau died after a Land Rover crashed into a prep school in Wimbledon on Thursday. Another 8-year-old girl is in a life-threatening condition, and a woman in her 40s remains in a critical condition. The 46-year-old female driver, arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving, has been bailed pending further inquiries. The Chancellor admits that halving inflation is proving harder than expected. Jeremy Hunt says the Tories' pledge of inflation reaching 5% by the end of the year is going to be more challenging than first thought. Mr Hunt also says tax cuts can't be introduced if it makes the battle against inflation more difficult. Inflation remains at 8.7%. The government has released an online video in a bid to stop fly tipping. The tweet from the Prime Minister's official page says it means game over for fly tippers. Bigger on-the-spot fines for litter, graffiti and fly tipping are now in force as part of a crackdown on antisocial behaviour. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
Thank you, Ray. Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, you cannot get rid of racism with racism. This morning, I read that white people have been excluded from weekend literacy classes in North London because the lessons were for children from black and black heritage families. Here we go again. So basically, parents at schools in North London have been told that the Saturday school near Academy Places will only be funded for black people, or those of black heritage. I mean, the reason? To accelerate progress in reading and writing, whilst also developing the children's knowledge of black history and culture. Let me translate that. We are now indoctrinating our kids with our division and our racism. For goodness sake. I mean, surely you would teach everybody the history, but not the skewed version of the slave trade which portrayed black people as victims of oppression. Black people were slave owners as well, by the way. Why not teach them the history of mankind? Teach all the children, irrespective of colour, that mankind came from Africa. So if that's true, then ultimately we all have black heritage. But oh no, they want to sow the seeds of oppression and division early, so it turns into something as divisive as this in adulthood. You may remember a few weeks ago I wrote and spoke about the Theatre Royal Stratford East, who were planning something of a similar ilk, a black-only performance of Tambo and Bones, which explores 300 years of African-American history. Well, this week they held their black-only performance. It had been open to all, but on Wednesday they had a blackout event, where for one night only, white people were advised not to attend. The reason? Organisers insist was to create a safe, private space for an all-black identifying audience, free from the white gaze. Now, I can't actually believe that they felt it was OK to use that phrase. The theatre claimed that no one is excluded from the play. But it also made it pretty clear that white people were not welcome. This is what people said as they were going in to watch.
I think the biggest importance is that we need space for ourselves, you know, just to feel free and exist.
Is that what they'd call the white gaze?
I think so. I think that's part of it.
What do you think of that term?
I mean, it's accurate.
I think spaces where people can just be free, be open and feel comfortable are necessary for all community.
What's wrong with white people?
What's wrong with them? It's not that there's anything wrong with white people. I think it's in the same way that like an LGBTQ plus space is for LGBTQ plus people.
His famous quote, of course, where he says, "I had a dream that my children would be judged on the content of the character, not the colour of their skin."
What he was saying was that all people should be judged evenly, but we are not judged evenly in the traditional theatre spaces.
How are black people treated unfairly in theatre? Can you give some examples?
Oh, I'm not here to go into that now because this is a very casual interview outside of another event, and I have many experiences of being treated as other within the spaces I am working by people who are in the audience. I'm not talking about theatre
audience members.
By audience members.
So what would they do? Just
No. This is not honouring my experience to come and try and trivialise it by just giving you some short answer.
I'm not trivialising it.
I'm saying it would. I'm not saying you
right.
are.
God, how patronising. So once again, white people, and this time primary school-aged children, are being excluded from an educational opportunity which describes its services as a Saturday school for children of African and Caribbean descent. I find it quite chilling. But it's hardly surprising that this victim mentality is becoming the norm when you've got a load of po-faced left-leaning individuals and organisations turning up the woke dial to correct wrongdoings like the nonsense that is reparations for links to slavery, the likes of Laura Trevelyan with her pathetic offer to pay a measly sum to make up for all her family and their so-called slave-owning wrongs. The money she cobbled together, just over 100 grand for the people of Grenada, amounted to less than £1 per head. And while she wrote her story in the woke of woke newspapers, The Guardian, it turned out that founders of the rag had links of their own. Brands like Ben & Jerry's displaying their woke credentials by tweeting on July the 4th, it's American Independence Day, that America returns all stolen land. But a Native American chief in Vermont claimed that Ben & Jerry's HQ is actually on stolen indigenous land. Excluding white people is fuelled by ideologies like critical race theory that paint white people as the oppressors, with white privilege as such must acknowledge that they are inherently racist and that black people are victims of their oppression. People buying into ideologies like this are doing more damage. I mean, have they forgotten the words of Martin Luther King? A world where we are judged by the content of our character, not the colour of our skin. You cannot get rid of racism with racism. Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay? Former BBC chairman Richard Sharp has suggested that the wealthier households might have to pay more for the licence fee, doubling the current system regressive. But should we be paying for it at all? At 4:50, it's Royal Roundup time. Royal biographer Angela Levin will be in the studio to give us the latest from behind the palace walls. On the menu, according to Angela, Princess Catherine has transformed the front of the public eye from a very shy royal powerhouse. But how has she done it? And then at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. Are we on the brink of a breakthrough for Alzheimer's? A momentous drug has given one family hope after David's son developed the disease 7 years ago. Stay tuned, because we'll hear all from David, who'll be joining me, and his wife, and they'll be sharing their story later. That's coming up in the next hour, so tell me what you think as ever on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. He's finally managed to get out of everyone's shot. Right,
yeah. All about me.
It's not about you. You managed to get into everything, Sam.
He's like water. He gets everywhere.
But it looks like we all got the blue memo.
And we did.
Very good.
I know. I've dressed as the Wimbledon umpire, I thought, today. I'll definitely score some points off you today.
A saucy one, however, Lizzie. A saucy umpire.
So what do you think then? OK, so we're at it again. We had this whole thing on Wednesday, which I found abhorrent, where you're saying, oh, the white gaze, which I'm like, how can you say that? You cannot say the white gaze. It's an insult. So what is that? I mean, you're doing it, the two of you. Stop it. Stop looking at me. Stop it. Stop it. But what do you think? So now we've got schools getting in on the action and sort of saying, well, Saturday schools for black and Caribbean people and things like that.
Well, I know quite a few white gays, actually. No, but... See, next to one now. But, yeah, on that note, I kind of agree with somebody who was outside the theatre. I mean, obviously, if you have an LGBTQ space, you want to, well, like they kept saying, like, feel free, etc. But obviously, that's multiracial and you know, and multi-gendered, etc. So it's and also, like, you know, like for example, I remember being at a bar once and my sister and her husband couldn't come in because they wouldn't allow them to come in because they were straight, etc. And I completely disagree with that. So I think I don't know. It's a weird one because then you have obviously, like, you know, Jewish-only schools or religious schools in particular, but obviously other people can go. So I think, you know, with education and with theatre, it should be open to everybody. I mean, but maybe as a suggestion or something. I don't know. I mean, like, you know, what if, for example, there's a gang of mates who are all black and they have one white pal? They're like, well, we're all going to the theatre and you can't come. Do you know what I mean?
Well, they said that, for the theatre performance, they said that everyone's welcome, but they made it quite clear they didn't want any white people there. The white gays thing is a real put-off right there.
Yeah.
And your friends would be double whammies if they were gay and then the gays as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But can you imagine if this was on the other foot and we were saying no blacks? And, I mean, this is, I mean, one of the interviewer there from GB News was, what is wrong with white people? And why are we having this diversity? I have worked so hard with the football clubs to stop racism, and we've come a long way in 20 years from when I was at the shed at Chelsea with all the chanting and everything else. We've gone so far, and this is just putting it backwards. And I don't understand how they can say this, because, as I said, if it's on the other foot, there would be a total... absolute riots and uproar about it, and I think it's totally disgusting. And if we're supposed to progress and learn, you know, banning from Saturday school, you know, how are children supposed to learn about history in the past and progress?
But also, like we were saying, like, you know, poorly educated people are, you know, they're not just black people. A lot of white people, a lot of all races are poorly educated. So, you know, if there's a chance for anyone to get extra education on a Saturday, surely that should be open to all people in the area.
Why be judged on the colour of your skin?
Exactly.
We're all equal.
Exactly.
Why is this happening?
And
why
also,
is it allowed to happen?
if you're mixed race, what can you can only slightly come.
You've got a choice, but you know, you've got a choice. Then you can either go or not go. But if you were more white and look, maybe you'd get away with it because of your heritage. But then this is the fundamental error with this: that if we are to believe science, that mankind came from Africa, and it turns out that black women have the mitochondria in their DNA to produce any type of human. Apparently, this is what I've read. If that being said, it means that everybody has come from Africa. I would go with the science. So everybody has black heritage. So why are they making it so divisive? And why are they educating the children separately? In my view, they're indoctrinating their own racism onto the children and perpetuating the scenario of racism.
Yes, and it is racism. But as a white female, if I'm to speak out about this, I feel a bit intimidated and silenced because they're going to actually think I'm racist because I'm speaking out about it.
But it's like I went to a private school and it was very multicultural, and you know, and then I remember going to university afterwards, and people were like. I remember they were asking me, like, what's it like to know a Jewish person, etc. And I was like, how can you even ask that? It's so ridiculous. So unless you grow up with, you know, with seeing all colours, then you know you do retain some sort of racism, no matter where you're from.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you could, you know, some people just wouldn't see it as anything. So you imagine you haven't grown up with other people of different colours, but nobody's divided you, or nobody's told you a dodgy recollection of the slave trade that meant that black people were oppressed. Nobody's told you that version of events, so you don't know any of that, so you don't think anything. My son, he's 6 now. He's 6. He had his birthday last week.
Happy birthday.
But anyway, he doesn't know that his friends are different to him in any way, shape or form. So unless I tell him, he's not going to think that.
And that's how it should be.
That's how it should be. These are primary school kids, so these are children. You're creating the division when they're young now, so that will perpetuate into stupidness like the white gaze, which these are adults speaking in that way, having known the story and Martin Luther King and everything, and they're perpetuating it, and it's almost as though they can't see it.
Because as a kid, you don't see colour; they're just your friends. It's nothing to do with it. Colour should not come into it.
And we have to.
How is this allowed to really happen?
And we have to try and move on as like you said before in your monologue, as a human race, not as this part. Of course, there's been horrific stuff in the past, like with the British colonialism, etc. But all over the world, with slavery, all over the world. So it's not reserved to just one particular race at all. So we should try, because we all came from the same place. We all came from Africa, as you said. So why can't we all move on together in the 21st century?
Why can't they educate the kids with that?
Yes.
If it was me and I was writing the history curriculum, I would start it at the history of mankind. I would let children understand that we all came as one thing, and we've spread around the earth. And the reason why somebody may be darker skinned is because, well, it's sunny. The skin protects. That colour is more protective than white skin. The further you move away from the equator, probably the lighter your skin. It's really quite simple, but yet they're not educating the children that. They're educating them like this, and this is why we will have racism forever.
We have to learn from our past mistakes with racism, and the only way we can learn is by knowing the history and moving on.
Well, no, and also. Well, listen, we contacted the theatre for comment, but they haven't received a response yet. But they have previously said that Tambo and Bones staged at Stratford East is a bold new play, a satire which actively explores race and what it is to be black. We've chosen to embrace this initiative for one performance during the play's month-long run as a space for black audiences to experience the play as a community. On the theatre's website, it says that no one is excluded. And we did say that. Well, this is GB News, and GB News has reached out as well for comment, and previously Councillor Zina Brabazon from Haringey Council has told The Telegraph it has been long recognised in Haringey that there is historic and established attainment gap between black African and black Caribbean pupils and their white British peers. Our schools here in Haringey and the local authority are absolutely determined to collectively do something about their statistics. Our teaching staff go to great lengths to ensure that all children and young people, irrespective of their race or background, receive the very best education possible. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come in this week's difficult conversation. Are we on the brink of a breakthrough from Alzheimer's? A momentous drug has given one family hope after David Assam developed the disease 7 years ago. I'll be joined by David and his wife, who'll be sharing their story. But now let's get an update with the weather.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast, where we continue to see some heavy showers, possible thunderstorms through the rest of the weekend, and still fairly warm and humid across the UK. Looking at the bigger picture, in this area of low pressure just sits to the west of us, allowing that warm air to come up from the near continent, developing those shower clouds and thunderstorms across the UK right through the rest of the weekend. And we still have thundery showers across the north and the east this Saturday evening. Could be some local disruption. Some longer spells of rain for Scotland, northeast England for a time too into the early hours. But for many, it will become quieter. There'll be clear spells, but still fairly warm and humid tonight, particularly in the east, lows of 17 or 18 degrees, whilst the west will be a little fresher. Sunday morning, a bright start for many. Cloud and outbreaks of showery rain pushing into southeast England, and the rain across Scotland takes its time to clear here. And then it's a day of sunny spells and heavy showers once more. Showers most frequent across western parts of the UK. Some thunderstorms could lead to some local disruption, particularly parts of Northern Ireland into Wales, southwest England too. And temperatures overall a little lower compared to Saturday, highs around 25 or 26 Celsius. Into the evening time, thunderstorms continue to push their way northwards, but they will ease by the end of the day. And then overnight, we're looking at clear skies once more. And temperatures just dropping a little lower compared to recent nights, but still towns and cities 13 to 15 Celsius. So it means a bright start for many on Monday morning. Plenty of sunny spells, thicker cloud across the north of Scotland, and then all eyes to the west of this area. Low pressure starts to bring in more showery rain into western parts, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, the West Country at times too. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers breaking through. Further showers are expected Tuesday and Wednesday. Temperatures a little fresher than they have been of late.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
And this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the Great British Debate. I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay? That is on the way next. Stay tuned. Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. Tell me what you think. As ever, you can tweet me at GB News. There's a poll up right now asking that very question. Cast your vote now. Good afternoon, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Before the break, I was discussing a theatre that hosted a performance where white people were urged not to attend, and also the fact that a school asked for black and Caribbean heritage pupils to come to the Saturday school. Let's see what you've been saying. What if a white bloke turns up with his black wife? Yeah, good question. Ron says, thank you all for just being there and fighting for the issues that other media outlets will not tackle. Melvin says, your balanced view is so refreshing. Don't fight racism with racism. Thank you very much, Melvin. Appreciated. Right, it's 27 minutes after 4 o'clock. It's time now for the Great British Debate. I'm Nana Akua. I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay? Former BBC chairman Richard Sharp has suggested that wealthier households might have to pay more for the licence fee, dubbing the current system regressive. The licence fee is currently £159 and it's due to rise with inflation in the coming years. The former BBC top dog said fees could be determined by a household levy based on the value of someone's home or a tax on broadband bills. But should the public keep footing the bill in any case? Could the BBC turn into a subscription-based model? Surely. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for them to stop expecting us, the public, to pay? So joining me now to discuss, Nick McShane, Peter Spencer, Martin Campbell, and also Sarah Louise Robertson. Well, I'm going to start with you, Martin. He's a former chief advisor to Ofcom. Martin, is it time they stop expecting us to pay, find some other way of funding themselves?
Well, I mean, Richard Sharp is certainly right in saying that it is a debate for Parliament. It's got to be debated. But, you know, the idea of means testing, I mean, there isn't a good way of means testing. But the whole problem with that, and I don't think the idea of a broadband tax is too bad, but I don't think that the public will accept it because the BBC are doing themselves no favours. I mean, they're losing public trust as each day goes by. You know, it's not just the Lineker thing, it's the increasing woke agenda, it's the way they're dismantling local radio, the fact they've got no control over talent, and that, you know, the recruitment process is a joke. I don't think that they can take the public with them, and I think that's going to be the real problem.
Sarah Louise.
I disagree with you there. I think they can take the public with them. We're very lucky to have the BBC in this country, to have such a great institution. It is the envy of other countries. The Americans look at the BBC and they go, wow, how do you have such a brilliant state broadcaster? We should be valuing them instead of tearing them down at every opportunity. They are great value for money. If you were to look at what they offer on a subscription-based service, you'd be looking at paying around about £400 a year. So £159 for the great programmes and dramas that they turn out really is value for money. And the problem why they haven't been spending is because they're too frightened to spend at the moment, because they're frightened of this criticism if they spend any money. That's why they lost shows like Bake Off to Channel 4. So I think we should be really proud to have them. Yes, there does need to be some reform. They should not be wasting money on rubbish like diversity training and all of that woke nonsense. I agree that there needs to be a good businessman come in and take over the running of it and get rid of all
perhaps they could cut Gary Lineker's salary. Let's go to Peter Spencer.
Just look at the history here. The British Broadcasting Company Limited started off as a private commercial enterprise. OK, later on it became the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. But nonetheless, John Reith and that bunch of likely lads who set it up had no idea if it would fly or flop. It flew. Then a few decades down the line along came ITV. And when I was a kid, it was considered rather vulgar to have an aerial over your house which showed that you watched ITV with all those grubby, disgusting, filthy commercials. Well, we all got over that. So to my mind, it is an absolute no-brainer. You can't either means test it or put it on general taxation. So the obvious answer is to simply fund it with advertisements, the same as commercial, same as ITV.
God, well, but they'd wipe the floor with them. But they'd wipe the floor with everybody because they've got all their handling and everything. Dennis McShane, very briefly, you've got 30 seconds, Dennis.
Nana, you're completely right. We're in this area of defunding anything. Some people want to defund the royal family, others want to defund the police. Some people, Nadine Dorries said she'd abolish the licence fee by 2027, but I think we're going to abolish Nadine Dorries by 2027. It's a debate that will go on. The BBC is out of sync with the country. It's an irony that I hear a lot more arguments against Brexit on GB News than I do on the BBC. It's a British Brexit corporation. It's promoting the Sunak agenda, and it's a disaster for the country. It needs serious sorting out, but not, for heaven's sake, this chairman who was organising Boris Johnson's private finances. Let's get a sense of public duty and public ethics back into the BBC before it's
Dennis,
too late.
I'll have to leave it there. Dennis McShane, thank you very much. Former Labour MP, Peter Spence, political commentator, Martin Campbell, former chief advisor to Ofcom, and Sarah Louise Robertson, a showbiz commentator. Thank you for your views. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. In response to Mr Sharp's claims, a BBC spokesperson said the licence fee is our agreed method of funding until at least 2027 and ensures the BBC is an independent universal broadcaster which invests in UK creativity and talent. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, I'll continue with the Great British Debate. I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay? Here are the thoughts of my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also political commentator Sam Dowler. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
32 minutes past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. And our top story, the Prime Minister has made it clear that Britain discourages the use of cluster munitions after the United States agreed to send them to Ukraine. President Biden says he stands by his decision despite criticism from human rights groups. Rishi Sunak, who will meet Mr Biden in London on Monday ahead of the NATO summit, says Britain is supporting Kyiv in other ways.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine.
Well, demonstrators have been protesting against plans to house asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset. It follows reports that the Bibby Stockholm, which can accommodate 500 people, could arrive this week. Neither Stand Up to Racism Dorset or No to the Barge Group want it moored at Portland Port. It's part of the government's plan to reduce costs by moving migrants out of hotel rooms. The BBC is reportedly investigating a claim that one of its well-known presenters paid a teenager for explicit pictures. It's alleged that the man paid more than £35,000 for the images, with The Sun saying that the young person was 17 years old. In a statement, the BBC said it takes any allegations very seriously and will act on any information that comes to light. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's time to get back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. I'm Nana. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, this week's difficult conversation. Are we on the brink of a breakthrough for Alzheimer's? A momentous drug has given one family hope after David and Sam developed the disease 7 years ago. Now, I'll be joined by David and his wife, who will tell me their story. But before that, it's the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay? That's on the way. Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's now time, though, for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay for it? Former BBC Chairman Richard Sharp has suggested that wealthier households might have to pay more for the licence fee, despite whether you watch it or not, stating that the licence fee system is regressive. That's true. And the licence fee is due to rise with inflation next year. But should the public keep having to foot the bill, irrespective of whether they watch the thing or not? Could the BBC turn into a subscription-based model? So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time the BBC stop expecting the public to pay? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Now, I'm going to start with you first, Lizzie. Yeah. What do you think? The BBC... the question wasn't whether we should carry on paying for it. It was more like, well, how should they carry on paying for it, which I find a little bit irritating.
Yeah, I do. Well, the BBC's got to look at its programming. It needs better programming. It needs to get updated. And I'm sick to death of some of their presenters that are supposed to be, neutral, not supposed to be talking about politics, being paid over millions of pounds. Yeah. And why should we pay for it? I'm sorry, the BBC have got to watch themselves, because a lot of people I know don't want to pay for it anymore, are gravitating to other providers like Amazon, Netflix and so forth. And it's not good enough. I mean, I love some of their shows. Richard Attenborough's show, one of their great
David Attenborough.
David Attenborough.
She knew what she meant.
And, I just think it needs a total reboot and be updated. And so the answer to your question is no.
Well, I think I love the BBC. We've grown up with the BBC, all of us, and but. When I grew up, there was 4 channels, and then there was 5, and then there was no cable, no streaming, no anything. So, the whole model of TV in general has changed dramatically, even in the last few years. And while obviously we all enjoy amazing coverage, like things like Glastonbury, for example, or the Queen's funeral, and also the King's coronation. Nobody does it better than the BBC. Everybody trusts the BBC during things like the pandemic as well. But price-wise, is it, you know, can some people afford it? Is it fair that they pay for it when they don't even watch it? Like there are certain things like, you know, like if you watch iPlayer and it says, do you have a license fee, and then you just say yes or no whether you have one or not. So I mean, it obviously doesn't work where, if, for example, if you sign on to Netflix, you can't just sign on if you don't have a sign-in. You need to have a proper sign-in, so maybe it will work that way. But either way, like, I think, you know, I know a lot of people think that it's not impartial. I happen to believe that it is impartial compared to a lot of other places.
But they've had so many rounds about its impartiality.
Of course.
So if it's impartial, you're happy with the likes of Gary Lineker making comments about things like, he's one of their presenters. If you work there in your cinemas, are you happy with them paying 1.3 million towards somebody like that?
But he didn't say that on one of their shows. He said that in his own time, didn't he?
I worked at the BBC when I said something on and I got punished for it. And I was
obviously it's one rule. It's one rule for Lineker.
Yeah, but that's the point. You said
it's not fair then, is it? And I think now it's
people.
time for the BBC to stand on its own feet, I'll be honest. And I'm sick of hearing what Gary's got to say. He's supposed to be impartial. And they've had many rows about their programmes about impartiality. There have been many from, it was Harry and Meghan, wasn't it? There was a programme they had on. And with the World Cup.
Well, both sides of the political spectrum say that it's impartial. So, people think... Absolutely they do. There was some people say it's all about the Tories, and some people say the other side.
Government office.
But when they do get involved in political things, so, for example, one of their journalists, Simon, I can't remember his last name, maybe it's Simon Baker or something like that, but one of their journalists wrote about the Nigel Farage thing on his Twitter, which he shouldn't be tweeting anyway, and he kind of tweeted out that, Nigel it's a commercial reason as to why Coutts got rid of Nigel's account. But then he had to backtrack because he hadn't done any research and hadn't realised that actually Coutts offered Nigel Farage a NatWest account after Nigel had gone public with it. So they didn't, so it wasn't quite the way. And then it turns out that loads of other people hadn't met their commercial requirement to have a Coutts account. And those people all said, well, we've also got Coutts accounts and we don't have 1 million in there either. And they also negated the fact that other relatives of Nigel's had also been barred from an account. So this is the sort of journalism that they're pitching to us, and we're going to pay for that. I'm not paying for that. That's rubbish.
And don't forget Martin Croxall, wasn't it, who was taken off air for a little bit.
Oh, I saw that,
about the Boris Johnson. I mean, that was absolutely disgraceful.
You've got a rumour now about another presenter who's done something somewhere. We don't know who he or she is, but we hear that somebody else now is up to something.
Well, it's on the front of the paper.
And we know it's a man, but also I think...
Well, you might not identify as one, so I was being generous.
But the BBC are supposed to be unbiased, and they're not.
Well, I know. Well, that's what I mean. They are supposed to be unbiased, and so therefore, if I get notifications from the BBC and I read BBC articles, and I never feel like that it's an opinion piece. We know what opinion pieces are like. You can go to the Mail Online and see opinion pieces, and the name and your name, for example, anybody's name who wrote it is there, so you know it's their opinion.
Well, it's all the more sensitive in my view that it gets away with not being an opinion piece when it is.
Which I don't think, like, for example, I watched a lot of News 24, and I never think that somebody is, because it's not to do with somebody's opinion.
What
it's
about
to do
their
with delivering the
coverage of
news.
Brexit, then? A lot of people lost faith in the BBC after it was so clear. And I know, I worked for the BBC at the time, that you could not express any other view than the narrative, which, in my view, was one that they hated Brexit and they supported Remain.
Well, I do remember that, but I never want to go back there. It was so toxic. You couldn't even go onto Facebook without seeing your friends arguing. It was hideous times.
It was it was awful. I'm going to bring his name up again, Gary Lineker. The mess with that, where he is supposed to be impartial.
That's just one person, though.
He's paid millions.
He's the highest paid presenter.
He's the highest paid.
Yeah, which is why they let him get away with it.
And you know what? If you don't pay your licence, you get a big fine, and then you could go to jail. Is this fine in this modern day world?
And anyway, I don't think that they should be allowed to just go straight to subscription base. I'd strip them of a lot of the assets they have, because remember, they've got a huge audience, so any advertiser would look and say, oh, the BBC, I'll advertise with them. So they will cream all the advertisers off all the other channels that are commercial. And I think that actually subscription-based, a lot of the stuff should come away. They have to sell all the bits, and I think they should only be focusing on world news and documentary dramas.
But they make a lot of money selling their IPs around the world as well, like Strictly or Doctor Who, things like that. Really popular IPs.
Some of the few good with shows, Strictly, Attenborough.
But they sell them all around the world as well.
Globally, yes. And they say, wow, but the BBC needs to have better programming. And I think it needs time to stand on its own 2 feet.
It also needs to return to local radio because they did a Hunger Games type thing of culling the members of staff from radio. Oh, won't tell you whether you've got the job or not. It was horrible. I know a lot of people who worked in local radio.
And all radio stations were guilty of that, to be fair.
No, but the
board.
BBC, they are supposed to be a public broadcaster, so I would expect a better standard from them. The singers, we're paying for them, and they cannot behave in that manner. But instead they did. I was not impressed. And I genuinely think that I don't watch them, so I think that actually we need to start talking about whether you should have to pay for something you don't watch. And I don't
Why can't we choose like we do with Amazon, Netflix? You know, isn't there a way that?
Yeah, but I'm sure at some point you've watched iPlayer or listened to a podcast on BBC Sounds or something like that. They all look at the weather. I mean, it's not just it's so many different aspects to the BBC. It's amorphous in how massive it is and its reach across the whole globe. So I mean, I think it's definitely a national institution along with the royal family and the NHS.
It's out of date, needs better programming, and I'm sorry, I feel sickened at the amount they pay certain presenters. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, the fact is, and also that nonsense when I told you about that journalist who was talking about the fact that Nigel Farage didn't reach the financial threshold, which was the reason why he didn't actually have the Coutts account and why they took it away. Then lots of other people then started tweeting and saying that actually they didn't reach the financial threshold either, and it just shows.
And Nigel actually said he has more money now.
So was it carried by any other stations? Because I saw the story because we texted about it, and was it picked up by the Sun or by any of the other newspapers?
I don't think anybody else picked it up because a lot of us had already done the research and knew already that Nigel had, that Nigel went public with this story.
It was nothing to
do
with
his
his
funds.
funds.
Why would he sort of start talking about that without doing the full research? It felt like a sort of politically motivated aspect. It didn't feel right. He should have been doing it, and that's the thing. I don't want BBC journalists saying things like that if they haven't fully researched the story, and that was exactly that. And we trust the BBC. A lot of people trust them, so they need to...
they're not being fair.
They need to be held to
Exactly, so you do trust them, is what you say?
Well, no, I did, but this shows nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our Great British Voices. Let's see what they think about it. Your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics I am discussing. Right, let's go over to Bristol. It's always great to speak to Lee Harris. He's our Great British Voice this afternoon. Lee, the BBC. Is it time they stopped relying on us having to pay for them compulsorily? Literally?
Yeah, I mean... I listened to I read the article about Richard Sharp, and in my opinion, he's just fundamentally wrong. You're absolutely right to say we should not be talking about who pays more or means testing the licence fee. We should be talking about scrapping the licence fee altogether and making the BBC a subscription service. Then people will not be forced to pay for service they don't use. We're living in a world that's more connected and digital than ever before. But there is one thing that feels like it's stuck in the past, and it's the BBC licence fee. It's like a dinosaur in the age of streaming. I find it utterly staggering that if I want to watch GB News, which I do all the time, Nana,
very good,
and I don't watch anything on the BBC, I'm still expected to pay the licence fee like everyone else. It's an absolute joke. I pay for services that I want to watch. I should not be forced to pay for services that I don't want to watch. Me personally, I lost faith in the BBC ever since it was announced we were going to have a referendum leaving the EU. Their utterly disgraceful and relentless anti-Brexit bias was the main reason I started my Twitter account. I'd spend as much time as possible clipping everything that was just ridiculously biased and posting it online. And it's got worse since then, not better.
It has indeed.
Sorry?
We're running out of time, but I could always talk to Lee for ages.
I could go on for ages about the BBC, Nana.
And he also got the blue memo. Thank you very much, Lee Harris. He's a Great British Voice. Everyone's in blue today. Thank you so much. That's the fabulous Lee Harris. He's our Great British Voice. You can also be one as well. Just get in touch here at GB News. But you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Coming up, it's this week's difficult conversation. Are we on the brink of a breakthrough for Alzheimer's? A momentous drug has given one family hope as David Assam developed the disease 7 years ago. I'll be joined by David and his wife, who will share their story. But now let's get some weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast, where we continue to see some heavy showers, possible thunderstorms through the rest of the weekend, and still fairly warm and humid across the UK. Looking at the bigger picture, in this area of low pressure just sits to the west of us, allowing that warm air to come up from the near continent. developing those shower clouds and thunderstorms across the UK right through the rest of the weekend. And we still have thundery showers across the north and east this Saturday evening. Could be some local disruption. Some longer spells of rain for Scotland, northeast England for a time too into the early hours. But for many, it will become quieter. There'll be clear spells, but still fairly warm and humid tonight, particularly in the east, lows of 17 or 18 degrees, whilst the west will be a little fresher. Sunday morning, a bright start for many. Cloud and outbreaks of showery rain pushing into southeast England, and the rain across Scotland takes its time to clear here. And then it's a day of sunny spells and heavy showers once more. Showers most frequent across western parts of the UK. Some thunderstorms could lead to some local disruption, particularly parts of Northern Ireland into Wales, southwest England too. And temperatures overall a little lower compared to Saturday, highs around 25 or 26 Celsius. Into the evening time, thunderstorms continue to push their way northwards, but they will ease by the end of the day. And then overnight, we're looking at clear skies once more. And temperatures just dropping a little lower compared to recent nights, but still towns and cities 13 to 15 Celsius. So it means a bright start for many on Monday morning. Plenty of sunny spells, thicker cloud across the north of Scotland, and then all eyes to the west of this area. Low pressure starts to bring in more showery rain into western parts, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, the West Country at times too. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers breaking through. Further showers are expected Tuesday and Wednesday. Temperatures a little fresher than they have been of late.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Oh, thanks. Oh, cracky, I was just talking to Angela there. I was just saying I've grown cucumbers and tomatoes. I've eaten one cucumber, there's another one hidden under the flap, and I'm waiting for that to finish. Anyway, I better not eat them too fast. But this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, coming up, it's time for the Royal Roundup, and Royal biographer Angela Levin will be in the studio to give you all the latest from behind the palace walls. On the menu, the latest from Harry and Meghan. That's on the way. So right now, though, it is time for that. So let's delve into that with Angela Levin. She's here live on TV, online and on digital radio. We'll be discussing after the break.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and of course this week is no different. Loads of things on the menu. King Charles and Camilla, they were presented with the Scottish Crown Jewels entitled The Honours of Scotland. And then Prince Harry, he's going to head to Africa following his US visa debacle. Every Sunday, Saturday even, I love to give you a rundown, and who better to do so than royal biographer Angela Levin. Angela.
Hello.
Right. Lovely
Yes.
start to the week. King Charles in Edinburgh.
Yes, I think that it went very well. There was a group of people who were shouting, "Not our king, not our king," but there was loads of people who were shouting, "Our king, our king." And I think I found it slightly second best to the coronation. They kept saying it's not the coronation, but it was actually in its position. I thought it was lovely, and I like the way he touched the crown. You mustn't put it on, you must just touch it gently. And then you can kiss your finger, but you can't kiss the crown. I'm not sure why, but you mustn't, so they did that. And I thought that they were very relaxed, they seemed happy, and they were accepted very much by all the Scottish people who were lining the streets. And that's what's very important to all of us, actually. And they could actually relax in Scotland. They both love Scotland, and they love going around, they do lots of work there. So this sort of finished it off. Since the coronation.
He probably didn't want to put the crown on because it's heavy. He probably thought,
no, it didn't look heavy. It's quite small, it's not heavy. But it's just, they didn't want it to be the coronation. They just wanted to go through the things about Scotland rather than actually try and copy it in a sort of a cut-back way, so that's good. You always like to hear about Prince Harry. I think it's actually disaster waiting, really. He loves Africa, and he's obviously going there in the hope that he can make a decent broadcast.
Maybe he's hoping to bump into Chelsea Davy.
She's married with a child.
Nobody talked about her, 115 times at that court case, and then he talked about...
So that he wants to do that to keep the money coming from Netflix. However, today there's rumours coming from the Meghan's side that, you know, he's decided he doesn't want to be in the spotlight anymore. You won't see much of him. You know, Meghan is used to it and she does very well. Oh, yes. But Harry doesn't. In other words, I take it to say, and this is really unpleasant, but I think it might very well be what's going on, that she's got enough of it now, and she's had what she wants from him. She can go forward with her new PR and everything, all the things that are going to be offered to her, and love it. And Harry we will hardly see. But she's not going to split with him. Of course she won't, because if she does, she loses a lot of people's interest, because that's what they're really interested in. And I think it's tragic. Otherwise, he's going to Africa. Will America let him back when he's admitted to all these illegal drugs? And when will he see his little children? He loves small children, and he would adores his own, presumably. So I don't know how he's going to manage. He's not going to be coming back and forth in a private jet. They won't pay for that. So that's concerning. The other thing I'd like to just mention is my huge respect for Fergie, because she did a podcast the day before she had a 9-hour operation and a mastectomy, and said, you know, please, everybody, you should go and see it. You know, you don't have a lump, you can just have a shadow. Please go, everyone. And then she had this operation for 8 hours.
She's brilliant, isn't
and she was in intensive care for 4 days, but she's not making a big deal about poor me. She's just saying, OK, I'll get over it. She's got her daughters there, which is really nice. And King Charles is not going to push them out of the Royal Lodge while she's recovering, which is, of course, what he should do.
He wouldn't do that. That would look callous.
No.
Well, we wish her a speedy recovery as well. She's fantastic, as are you, Angela. Angela Levin, she's our royal biographer. This is the GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines on the way. My incredible guest for difficult conversations. We'll be talking Alzheimer's. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, 2 minutes past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. And our top story this hour, the Prime Minister says Britain discourages the use of cluster munitions after the US agreed to send them to Ukraine. President Biden says he stands by his decision, despite criticism from human rights groups. Rishi Sunak, who will meet Mr Biden in London on Monday ahead of the NATO summit, says Britain is supporting Kyiv in other ways.
UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine.
Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky has visited Snake Island to mark 500 days of war. The area in the Black Sea was retaken by the Ukrainian armed forces a year ago. Mr Zelensky is now in Istanbul holding talks with Turkey's President Erdogan in his first visit to the country since the start of the conflict. Demonstrators have been protesting against plans to house asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset. It follows reports that the Bibby Stockholm, which can accommodate 500 people, could arrive this week. Neither Stand Up to Racism Dorset or No to the Barge group want it moored at Portland Port. It's part of the government's plan to reduce costs by moving migrants out of hotel rooms. At least 350 people have crossed the English Channel in 7 small boats today. That follows 686 who crossed in 13 dinghies yesterday. That's the highest single-day figure this year. No to the Barge Group organiser Alex Bailey says he won't stop fighting.
We're going to continue our campaign. Open letters. We are going to talk to them in person if we can. Next week there is an open council meeting with Dorset Council. We are going to attend. We today then are going to make our voices heard, and the people of Portland, the people of Weymouth and the people of Dorset.
The BBC is reportedly investigating a claim that one of its well-known presenters paid a teenager for explicit pictures. It's alleged that the man paid more than £35,000 for the images, with the Sun saying that the young person was 17 years old. The newspaper says the teen's family complained to the broadcaster in May. In a statement, the BBC said it takes any allegations very seriously and will act on any information that comes to light. The family of an 8-year-old girl who was killed in southwest London have described her as intelligent and cheeky. Selina Lau died after a Land Rover crashed into a prep school in Wimbledon on Thursday. Another 8-year-old girl is in a life-threatening condition, and a woman in her 40s remains in a critical condition. The 46-year-old female driver, arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving, has been bailed pending further inquiries. The Chancellor admits that halving inflation is proving harder than expected. Jeremy Hunt says the Tories' pledge of inflation reaching 5% by the end of the year is going to be more challenging than first thought. Mr Hunt also says tax cuts can't be introduced if it makes the battle against inflation more difficult. Inflation remains at 8.7% currently. The government has released an online video in a bid to stop fly tipping. The tweet from the Prime Minister's official page says it means game over for fly tippers. Bigger on-the-spot fines for litter, graffiti and fly tipping are now in force as part of a crackdown on antisocial behaviour. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. So let's get back to Nana.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is columnist and journalist Lizzie Cundy. and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Still to come, it's this week's difficult conversation. Are we on the brink of a breakthrough for Alzheimer's? A momentous drug has given one family hope after David and Sam developed the disease 7 years ago. I'll be joined by David and his wife, who will share their story in a few moments' time. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? Sir Keir Starmer has drawn up plans for a tax raid on fee-paying schools in a bid to raise money for other education policies. But is this financially viable? And then another story that caught my eye. Under new guidance from the Crown Prosecution Service, a spouse who refuses to pay for their partner's gender reassignment surgery could be deemed a domestic abuser. Eh? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at GBNews. So it's now time for difficult conversation and a really moving story that has given one family quite a bit of hope. 78-year-old David Assam started developing Alzheimer's 7 years ago. And since then, it hasn't been easy for him. David's been forced to give up work as a joiner and faced a mountain of challenges every day. Now, he was later put on a new drug called lecanemab. I hope I said that right. I'm pretty sure I said it wrong. Lecanemab, as part of an international trial for those with early-stage Alzheimer's. His wife has previously said that although he is deteriorating, David is still able to take part in various activities, but which she owes to the trial. Now, on Thursday, the US Food and Drug Administration granted traditional approval for the different drug, marking decades of scientific progress towards treatment. And this all comes after the shocking Alzheimer's diagnosis for beloved TV star Fiona Philip at the age of 62. So I'm pleased to say, joining me now is Cheryl and David Assam. Thank you very much for joining me both. Now they're coming. There you go. Right, nice to see you both. Thank you so much. Now Cheryl.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, David. Hi. So, Cheryl, talk to me about how you and David became involved in this particular trial.
David started to lose his memory, which is a very minor part of Alzheimer's, about 7 years ago. And so, therefore, I started looking for options. When you go to a GP at the moment, if you're diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, there isn't anything they can do. So I started making inquiries and discovered that there were some trials that we could get involved in. And 3 years ago, we started at Recognition Health on the trial for lecanemab. And at that stage, we had no idea that there would be some success, which is absolutely amazing. We did the trial, we talked about it, and decided that we'd rather do something than nothing. And we knew the risks involved. There haven't been any deaths, I don't think, from lecanemab, but from donanemab, there have been very few, a couple of deaths. So we knew the risks, but we thought, well, even if it doesn't help us, it might help future generations.
Yeah.
So that's how we started the journey. We've now had 80 visits to Recognition Health, plus David has to have MRI scans, lumbar punctures, PET scans. So it's a big commitment. It took our life over.
Yeah.
But we both feel it was a miracle. It's like winning the lottery, because there were 1,750 people worldwide who were given that drug, and David is one of them.
Very lucky.
So
very lucky.
to have got on the trial was just wonderful.
Yeah. So David, can you share your experience of using I can't say, is it lecanemab? Lecanemab.
Lecanemab.
Yeah. So you've been on this for what, 3 years now? How has it affected your life?
Well, it just naturally changes the life that you had previously. You don't now have, but we are still having a nice life where we live. So it's not all bad. So, we just keep going, and that's all you can do.
And it gave us hope, and so we're hoping that by telling people of our journey, that will give them hope. This is specifically for Alzheimer's. It doesn't help people with vascular dementia. But the two drug companies who have brought out lecanemab, which is Eisai and Biogen, and then donanemab, which is the other successful drug, which is by Lilly. As it happens, our very good friend, Mike Colley, is also a volunteer for donanemab, and he's here too. So if you like, he will say a word and tell you what you feel about being on the trial.
Yeah,
like to do that?
We'd definitely like to hear that. It's always good to hear from people who are actually taking this drug.
Hi.
I can see you. Move your head in a bit. I can see you now. So you're taking, which drug are you taking? Lecanemab as well?
No, donanemab.
He's taking the other
I
one.
take one called donanemab.
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 Well, none of us can say it. How has it impacted
That's always been a bit of a problem, that word.
How has it impacted you then, taking this drug?
Well, I feel extremely lucky to have been put on the clinical trial. And since I've been on it nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
About 2 years. And I feel better about it. I feel confident.
Yeah.
And I'm sure now we know the drug is going to be successful, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people like me coming through it.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, really, because and this drug, the aims of these drugs to slow it down, so they don't actually cure it, but do you feel that it's kind of slowing down the progress of the disease?
It definitely is that, whether it's my imagination, but it's given me confidence to believe that, and I do believe it. And as I say, I'm very, very lucky and appreciative of being on the trial.
What were you like before you took the drug? I'm quite curious to hear how he was before he took the drug, because it's always... So these drugs, they're only on trial at the moment. Cheryl, do you know if it's likely that they're going to be available for people to trial, more people to trial them? And just give us an idea of how you got to get your husband on the drug.
Yes. So lecanemab has received approval in the United States, and so it is possible to get it in the States at the moment.
Okay.
And I believe that donanemab, which is the one Mike's on, they're going to be making an announcement very soon. So both are considered to be a success. So what they do is they stop the amyloid building up in the brain. So that's what Alzheimer's is all about. The amyloid builds up unnaturally. Everybody has it, but with people with Alzheimer's, too much accumulates on the brain. And so this drug has been proved. Now, Mike said, I feel better, so I think I'm better, maybe. But with David, we know for sure from the MRI scans, PET scans, that the amyloid has reduced in his brain.
Wow.
So that's why we're allowed to talk about it. Recognition Health, who are forefront, Dr. Emma McSweeney, is a world-leading authority on this, and she said, yes, we know that it has worked, it is working. But it's breaking down the amyloid, stopping it adhering to the brain cells. But you have to remember that with David, for example, a lot of the brain cells have already died.
Right.
So you can't go back.
So you can't go back, but if you catch it early, you could prevent almost, it's acting almost as a preventative method. That's really great.
So in time to come, if somebody finds they're having early symptoms, get Alzheimer's diagnosed properly, which is through a PET scan or a lumbar puncture, they could possibly have a 3 or 6 month dose of either of these drugs, as you would for cancer maybe, and then maybe never ever go on to develop Alzheimer's.
Wow.
How wonderful is that?
Well, listen, you know what? We're all wanting that to be the case. And you'll keep us updated, Cheryl, of your progress and your husband's progress and also his friend, because it's interesting that they've come up with some great drugs now, and maybe we're on the way to trying to maybe find a cure or a preventative method to stop this from taking hold. Cheryl, David and your friend, what was his name? I missed his name.
Mike Colley.
Michael.
Yeah, Mike Colley.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for your thoughts. So those drugs, say them again. Oh, Cheryl's gone now. But I can tell you that one of them was lecanemab, and that is spelt L-E... well, can we get them back? I'll just quickly ask Cheryl to just say those drug names again, because I know our viewers... Cheryl, can you say those drug names again? Because I know there'll be many viewers and listeners who want to know what those drugs are.
Yeah. So lecanemab and donanemab, they both finish in MAB, and this is the first time in history, this is really important, that there has been any drug that has shown any success. So that's how exciting this breakthrough is.
Fantastic.
Now
fingers crossed.
It was a British scientist who first had the idea. But
well, listen, fingers crossed Alzheimer's will be a thing of the past. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you, Mike, and David, for sharing your stories. Really appreciate that. So lecanemab, which is L-E-C-A-N-E-M-A-B, and I'll find the spelling of the other one. All right, stay tuned. This is GB News. Loads more to come in a few moments' time. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. What I can say is coming up under new guidance from the Crown Prosecution Service, a spouse who refuses to pay for their partner's gender surgery could be deemed a domestic abuser. That sounds a bit ridiculous to me. We'll be discussing that. The weather is next.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast, where we continue to see some heavy showers, possible thunderstorms through the rest of the weekend, and still fairly warm and humid across the UK. Looking at the bigger picture, in this area of low pressure just sits to the west of us, allowing that warm air to come up from the near continent, developing those shower clouds and thunderstorms across the UK right through the rest of the weekend. And we still have thundery showers across the north and the east this Saturday evening. Could be some local disruption. Some longer spells of rain for Scotland, northeast England for a time too into the early hours. But for many, it will become quieter. There'll be clear spells, but still fairly warm and humid tonight, particularly in the east, lows of 17 or 18 degrees, whilst the west will be a little fresher. Sunday morning, a bright start for many. Cloud and outbreaks of showery rain pushing into southeast England, and the rain across Scotland takes its time to clear here. And then it's a day of sunny spells and heavy showers once more. Showers most frequent across western parts of the UK. Some thunderstorms could lead to some local disruption, particularly parts of Northern Ireland into Wales, southwest England too. And temperatures overall a little lower compared to Saturday, highs around 25 or 26 Celsius. Into the evening time, thunderstorms continue to push their way northwards, but they will ease by the end of the day, and then overnight we're looking at clear skies once more, and temperatures just dropping a little lower compared to recent nights, but still towns and cities 13 to 15 Celsius. So it means a bright start for many on Monday morning. Plenty of sunny spells, thicker cloud across the north of Scotland, and then all eyes to the west of this area. Low pressure starts to bring in more showery rain into western parts, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, the West Country at times too. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers breaking through. Further showers are expected Tuesday and Wednesday. Temperatures a little fresher than they have been of late.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, on the way next, it's the great British debate this hour. I'm Nana Akua. I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? Sir Keir Starmer has drawn up plans for a tax raid on fee-paying schools in a bid to raise money for other education policies. But is this financially viable? Don't go anywhere. Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? So Keir Starmer has released Labour's plans to shake up education funding with a new tax raid, which is removing a VAT exemption, which UK private schools are covered by due to their charitable status. So if elected next year, Labour believes the move would raise an extra £1.6 billion for education. Now, Keir Starmer himself has argued that it would pay for the most ambitious school improvement programme for a generation. However, education experts have raised concerns, saying the policy is unlikely to raise enough money and force up fees in private schools. Even the headmaster of Sir Keir's own alma mater, Sean Fenton of Reigate Grammar School in Surrey, has warned that the policy might force thousands of children into an oversubscribed state system. So what do you think? For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? Joining me now to discuss, Anne Widdecombe, member of Reform UK and former Tory Minister, and Reem Ibrahim, political commentator, Christine Cunliffe, head teacher at LVS in Ascot, and Dr Rakib Hassan. Right, I'm going to start with you, Dr Rakib Hassan. Is this a realistic idea? For me, I think it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, but what do you think?
Well, I think that there may well be a difference between what Labour believes that these policies would raise and what many experts are saying. Labour's projections suggest that these VAT exemptions for fees for independent schools would raise in the region of £1.6 billion, and this would help to fund its so-called ambitious shake-up of the UK's education system. But Nana, there are a number of experts saying that actually it's not going to be close to 1.6 billion. It's more likely to be in the region of 1 billion. And there's also the argument as well that if Labour was to introduce this policy, there is a possibility then that more pupils, which are currently in independent schools, would be pushed into the state sector. So that could also lead to pressures on school places in the state system. So I think there's a number of things that Labour really have to think about a bit more carefully on this front.
Anne Widdecombe.
Absolutely. There are something like 615,000 children in private education now. Obviously, not all of them will leave, but parents who are on fairly modest incomes who are sacrificing in order to get their children through private education, those are the ones that will leave. If they do leave, then first of all, Labour is going to have to pick up the cost of educating them in the state system. It's going to have to pick up the cost of expanding the state system in order to accommodate the numbers. If the schools themselves then shut, that means all those pupils will have to go somewhere else. And it will also have an impact on the local economy if a school shuts. So I think Labour just haven't thought this through, together with the fact that they don't appear to be quite certain what they're going to use this alleged money for. They keep coming out with different uses to which it could be put. Now, the other thing we have to consider is that private schools perform by and large very well. There are a few that don't, but by and large they perform very well. And who is going to be able to afford them? It's going to have to be the very wealthy and, of course, overseas. It isn't going to be anybody else. Now, I speak as somebody who came from a family which did make sacrifices. We weren't poor. My father was a senior member of the Admiralty. We weren't poor, but equally, they couldn't afford Eton. They couldn't afford that sort of stuff, but they sent the two of us to private boarding schools. They sacrificed for it. I thank them for it. And I don't see why other children shouldn't have those advantages too.
OK, well Christine Cunliffe, you're a head teacher at LVS in Ascot. What's your view?
Well, I totally agree with everything that's been said so far. And I think there's a lot of guesswork here as well, because we don't know how many children will be able to stay. And then the other thing is, there's a lot more information out now about what tax might look like, because if you're taxing school fees, what about the things you can recover? So, for example, boarding school fees at the moment, I think, would be exempt. So our school's going to be really playing clever, reduce your fees, the bit where you can claim that you put the VAT on, and put up the prices of the things you can claim it back. It's absolute nonsense, if you ask me. I think it hasn't been thought through. There are no firm figures, and the government are looking to, one, have egg on their faces, two, cost the economy so much more, and three, disadvantage children, especially those on full bursaries. who are being deprived of parental choice of where they want to go to school. I think it's absolutely disgraceful, and I think it needs a complete U-turn now before it's a little bit too late.
Another U-turn. They've done that on energy already. Reem.
Absolutely. I mean, I suspect this would be a deeply unpopular policy for many. It's expected that obviously with the scrapping of the charitable status of private schools, that would actually cost them about £104 million for those schools themselves. That would, of course, mean they will either have to increase tuition fees, pushing out a lot of those children into the already oversubscribed state education system. That is hugely problematic. We know that the solution to a lot of the educational problems in this country isn't to just throw more taxpayer money at it. Instead, what the government should be doing, and what the Labour Party should be doing if they are going into government at the next election, they should be thinking about reintroducing grammar schools, reintroducing choice, so that parents are then able to actually have that choice to send those kids to school. I went to a state school, but I wouldn't want any other choice for other parents to be taken away.
Yeah, it does seem a bit ridiculous. I can't see how this is going to work out. Anne Widdecombe, thank you very much. Also, Reem Ibrahim, Christine Cunniff, Dr. Rakib Hassan, thank you very much for your thoughts. Really good to hear you. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, we'll continue that great British debate this hour. I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
5:31, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. And our top story, the Prime Minister says Britain discourages the use of cluster munitions after the United States agreed to send them to Ukraine. President Biden says he stands by his decision despite criticism from human rights groups. Rishi Sunak, who will meet Mr Biden in London on Monday, ahead of the NATO summit, says Britain is supporting Kyiv in other ways.
UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine.
Demonstrators have been protesting against plans to house asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset. It follows reports that the Bibby Stockholm, which can accommodate 500 people, could arrive later this week. Neither Stand Up to Racism Dorset or No to the Barge Group want it moored at Portland Port. It's part of the government's plan to reduce costs by moving migrants out of hotel rooms. The BBC is reportedly investigating a claim that one of its well-known presenters paid a teenager for explicit pictures. It's alleged that the man paid more than £35,000 for the images, with the Sun saying the young person was 17 years old. In a statement, the BBC said it takes any allegations very seriously and will act on any information that comes to light. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, let's get back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're coming up to 1 million subscribers, so make sure you get there. You could be our 1 millionth one. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up, new guidance from the Crown Prosecution Service, or the CPS. A spouse who refuses to pay for their partner's gender reassignment surgery could be deemed a domestic abuser. Is that right? And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? That's all on the way next. Good afternoon, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, it's now time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? So Keir Starmer has released Labour's plans to shake up education funding with a new tax raid which removes a VAT exemption which UK private schools are covered by due to their charitable status, so basically removing the charitable status. Now, if elected next year, Labour believes the move could raise an extra £1.6 billion for education. And Keir Starmer himself has argued that it would pay for the most ambitious school improvement programme for a generation. But do you think perhaps his plans are literally the most ambitious plans and not realistic at all? What do you think? Are these suggestions by the Labour Party ridiculous? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Labour's school funding policy realistic? Let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Sam Dowler. I'm going to start with you, Dowler Fowler. Did you go to private school?
I did.
Did you?
I did, yes, and...
And your mum and dad want their money back.
Well, I mean... and my dad. My dad was a bit of a Cockney geezer, and he even sent me to elocution lessons when I was very young. So I used to say, Ellie, you still speak like this, Ellie.
I used to speak like this as well.
I know. So, but do you know what? This is something that Michael Gove said back in 2017. He said it was a burning injustice, and that was obviously coming from the Tory party. So yes, I do think that it is possible. I think. Obviously, school fees, I know the school fees where I went were extortionate, and they can be. And if there's anything that can maybe close the gap between private schools and state schools, then surely they should at least try it. This is going to be a new government, and maybe they need to shake things up a bit. And I think this is one of the reasons, one of the ways they're going to go about it. And I think it's a great idea.
I've got to say, I think on Keir Starmer's report it would say could do better, and he certainly wouldn't do very well in maths, because he's saying that this could raise 1.6 billion, and experts are saying it's going to be far less than that. And what this is doing is stripping young people from opportunities, and I think it's really sad. We're going to have oversubscribed state schools, and this has got Jeremy Corbyn written all over it, and we know what happened to his leadership campaign. It was a shipwreck.
But what about Michael Gove, though? And also, like, it's things like there was I don't know if it was Michael Gove or Keir Starmer said that Winchester College has a rowing club, a rifle club, an extensive art collection. I went, my partner, he went to a state school, and he laughs when I tell him about my fencing lessons and stuff like that, and my sailing lessons, and he's like, that's ridiculous. And of course, actually,
let me tell you, the parents are paying for that.
Yes, they pay for it.
I went to both. I went to a comprehensive school for 1 year, my grades slid. Then I went to a private school and my grades went back. Bottom line is, why should people who are doing well be pushed out for people who aren't doing as well? It doesn't make sense. It's a tax on aspiration. Private schools don't just provide just education. My old school provides a service where a car goes out and picks up all the old people, takes them for lunch for free and stuff like that. Lots of people get scholarships. There's way more to it than that. It's not as simplistic as Keir Starmer's
pupils are skipping opportunities and add value to, they are going to add value to the economy and engineering, scientifically, and they're missing out on the opportunity. And now the state schools are going to be oversubscribed. And I tell you what Keir Starmer should be looking at, fundamentally, what goes on in the classroom. We have pupils identifying as a cat.
Exactly.
I mean, how about look at what
a woman is?
Well, and that is why he cannot be our Prime Minister.
But he has talked about what's going on in the classroom. He talked about oracy, so speaking, which is annoying because I think he's trying to get away from the fact that this ludicrous policy.
Well, I mean, that's a joke. Can he not talk to Angela Rayner?
No.
And also, he talks like one of the Daleks from Doctor Who.
Perhaps he could work out what a woman is first.
And that's very personal, and he knows what a woman is. And
why didn't he say?
And also, nobody has identified as a
Sam,
cat.
why couldn't he answer the question? Why couldn't Keir Starmer answer the question? What is a woman? He couldn't answer the question.
Because at the time he was being trapped into. It was everybody was asking the same question, and he just fumbled over what he said. Yeah, but you keep saying it every single time, and it hasn't happened since then, and he just fell over his words. He knows what a woman is.
Over his words. He knows what a woman is. He wasn't prepared to say it because he wanted to sit on the fence, because he didn't want to cause offence to anyone at all, and that's not good enough for a leader, especially where women are concerned who will vote for him. Now, he's talking about oracy, or oracy, even, I can't even say it. Oracy. He's talking about oracy. Well, why can't he orate that, what a woman is? He struggled with that.
Look, this is just a moot point because this was said such a long time ago, and obviously if somebody asked him that question now, he would have a different answer because of what happened the last time. Of course he would.
Well, let's
of course,
no, he's trying to please everyone.
of course he would. But what we're talking about here is taking away the charity status of these private schools. So it's not even they're not taking away funds or anything like that. They're taking away the charity status so that it's about the 20% of VAT that they don't charge on the fees, and the fees are obviously extremely extortionate anyway.
Well, because otherwise they can claim the VAT.
But you know what?
Anyway, it just seems a bit ridiculous.
It's taxing. It's only 70% of children who attend independent schools, so that would be a drop in the ocean. And can I just remind you of Keir Starmer, because he's got snobbery in reverse, who went to uni education. So, Sam, will the real Keir Starmer stand up, please?
Look,
please.
he's obviously the leader of the opposition. So what he's maybe he's trying to find a footing. He's trying to obviously he has flip-flop on certain few things, but then look at the current government we have at the moment who flip-flop and they're a big old mess on a million things. Look at Liz Truss destroying the mortgage sector in a few short weeks.
No, that's not. I don't think that's fair to put that on Liz Truss. The raising of interest rates needed to happen. The Bank of England have made a mess of things. You cannot blame the mess of the Bank.
Keir Starmer should be talking fundamentally about the quality of teaching and what goes on in the classroom.
Absolutely. And if he's come up with an idea that might improve state schools and close that education gap, then all power to him. Let's at least let him try it.
Can I just say, we can't let somebody try something that's ham-fisted and ridiculous. First of all, because a lot of people are going to leave out of that state system, out of the private system. Now, imagine the parents are paying twice. Those parents won't be able to afford it. So then you might end up with kids with low grades. So he's not doing anything to improve the standard of education in the schools that he's sending them to. So now you've got more kids failing and you've got more burden on the education system. None of it adds up. He's not going to get the money he wants.
Yeah, but this is all conjecture, unless it's actually... unless he tries to do it, then, and then we'll see how it works out then.
He's stripping pupils of opportunities. That's what he's doing.
In what way? How?
He's making them leave private schools.
He's not making them leave private schools.
The parents can't afford it.
Because the parents won't be able to afford it, Sam.
The majority of people, for the school I went to, there were some super, uber wealthy people. But the majority of people were like my parents, who worked really hard, hard to get enough money to send me. Those, because they knew the value of a good education, as should the government, which is why there should be improving education across the board, rather than creaming off the top from people who are just scraping the barrel to try and afford to send their children to get a better education, because the state system is a failure.
Well, we don't necessarily know that it would be the case. We don't. A
lot of people have said that would be the case. My parents wouldn't have been able to afford it.
Well, I don't think probably my parents would have been able to afford it either.
So you wouldn't be here now.
But at the same time, wouldn't I be here? Or would I could have, because I mean, when I was at private school, I found myself, there was some other people in the class, many people in the class who were a lot cleverer than me.
Good.
So I didn't try as hard.
No,
because it was less competition. Whereas when I was at the state school before that, I was nearly at the top, so I did try really hard. I mean, it is all, and what he's saying about creative subjects as well. I mean, these are.
We're going to end up with a load of.
But this is a Jeremy Corbyn policy. This is a Jeremy Corbyn.
It's a Michael Gove policy.
It's a Jeremy Corbyn. Good old Starmer. And he never has a policy.
But Michael Gove said it was unjust, and that was 6 years ago.
I think it's so unfair on those, and they're going to miss out on opportunities. This country will miss out.
I don't think that if you improve the system, you don't improve the system by making the system that's doing well, taking money from that, because then in the end what will happen is that system will go down. So instead of improving one system, you're going to take down two. I think
you're in any danger of the private schools coming down.
But the state schools going to be oversubscribed.
Some private schools might close because they're not getting the funding because the parents won't be able to go. Then you've got more people going to the state schools. In actual fact, those parents are doing the government a favour by paying not only for the state education that they're not sending their children to, but also paying for private education. So it makes no sense now for Keir Starmer to put that up. I think it's politics of envy as far as
I think he's trying to grab the headlines, and let me tell you, he's estimating this will raise 1.6 billion. Absolutely not.
Well,
every expert is saying this is right.
But we're not economists, so we don't know if that's the case. But however, obviously, you look at all the teacher strikes, etc. You can guarantee that they're not private school teachers out there on the front line doing because they get paid better.
Well, they don't need to, because listen, it's just like getting your private healthcare, or you wait for the National Health Service. If you're prepared to pay for it, you can get a better service, and that's
what's wrong with private schools?
Well, let's see what our viewers think of that. Oh, where's my Great British Voices? Their opportunity to be on the show. show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go to? I've got 4 of you. So let's go. Let's start. Who have I got? Oh, look at all those nice little faces. Let's start with Jonathan Jones. He's there in Cornwall. Jonathan.
Nice to see you, Nana.
Yeah,
I think we should get the politics out
Next
of
time,
it.
bring your GB News
Everyone
mug.
I speak to has got really low expectations of any political party when it comes to education. Everyone I speak to says, just let the teachers get on with their jobs, whether it's private, public, or whatever type of school. The number one thing is give teachers the scope to do the jobs that they've been trained to do.
Yeah, cool. Cheers. And next time, GB News mug. We've got one next time. Right, let's go to Brian Dugan. He's been told now. Sorry, Brian, what do you think?
Hi, Nana.
Hi.
I think, look, you used the phrase earlier about the state school system being a failure. Well, then we've got to address that if that's the case. And I think any way in which we're trying to address that, we can't just poo-poo it. We don't know the full economics of it. I don't know whether it will raise £1.7 billion or not, what he is suggesting, Keir Starmer. But what I do know is, in terms of, I agree with you, you cannot remove that element of aspiration at any level. So at the level that you're speaking of, which I utterly agree with in terms of people who work really hard and want their children to advance themselves and have the opportunity, because that's what we all want. But equally, that should be open to all. And Michael Gove it was, not Keir Starmer, who used the phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations. And I think we have to factor that in as well, Nana. So I agree, absolutely. Aspiration is sacrosanct, but it should be aspiration for all.
Right, let's go to Mike Donovan in Oxfordshire. Mike.
Yeah, hi, Nana. 1.7 billion represents about 2% of the current education budget. But I'm always a man, economy first, and I do believe my daughter's been at private school and at state school. I believe that if you actually tax private schools, you're going to increase the divide. It'll become, it will marginalise the middle classes or the middle group, and I think it won't be. I don't think it will be of great benefit. I think the issue for teachers is the pressures that they're under today. They're under enormous pressure. So I believe that, state schools should be made to be better and more efficient, and should be taken out of this the politicization of education. There should be freedom of choice.
I agree. It's freedom of choice. I mean, how dare they take that away? Let's finally go to Lee Webb. He's there in Bedfordshire. Lee.
You know what? We've got quite a few private schools in Bedford, and a lot of them private schools, they do really good stuff within the community. They let their swimming pools out to the public, etc., to various clubs. We've got about 7% of the children, I believe, that are in private education. Now, that massively goes up to sixth form, which is around about 17 to 18% of children in private education. So a lot of them are on scholarships. We start taxing, they're going to lose their scholarships.
Well, exactly.
And so, therefore, the education is going to come down. And I think it's going to cost more to provide places for a lot of these private school kids that won't be able to afford to go to private school anymore.
You think he'd work that out, but he hasn't. He wants to do that when he's going to U-turn, obviously. Right, well, listen, thank you very much. Jonathan Jones in Solihull, Mike Donovan in Oxfordshire, and Lee Webb in Bedfordshire. Thank you very much. Right, it's time now for our quick-fire quiz. It's the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other topics hitting the headlines right now. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, your buzzer, please. And Sam Dowler, political commentator. Your buzzer. Question 1, please play along at home. Mark Zuckerberg has recently launched a new social media site, but what other site is it a direct competitor to? Is it A, Twitter, B, Instagram, or C, Snapchat? Ooh, Sam Dowler.
It's Threads, and I'm on it already.
No, you didn't answer the question.
Answer.
Oh, sorry.
Twitter.
I'm afraid I have to take your first answer. 1-0 to Lizzie Cundy.
That's not fair.
Well, read the question.
I joined it, but I don't know what to do on it. It's just not...
It's just like Twitter, and you go through your Instagram.
Like Instagram, to be honest
with you. Well, it is, yeah.
Well, yes, so the answer is, of course, Twitter. The name of the app is Threads, and you sign up through your Instagram account, and thank goodness it saves you from doing all the...
Oh, God, so handy.
It's
easy.
And we keep our blue ticks?
Blue tick. I haven't got a blue tick.
Oh,
You got one.
I'll get you one.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. Right, question 2. Famed speed eater Joey Chestnut made the news headlines this week for eating an astonishing amount of hot dogs in 10 minutes. But how many hot dogs did he eat? Closest answer wins. Sam Dowler.
56.
56, Lizzie Cundy?
I'm going to say 45.
45. I think you probably eat more than that. 62!
62?
Right. Sam Dowler was closest. He wins that one. 62 hot dogs, yes. How many did you eat, Lizzie?
Oh, I've eaten many a hot dog in my time, like a sausage.
We all like a sausage. Sausage in a bun.
That's what I ask you, darling. That's what I ask you.
I'm not asking you.
Do you have to chew them?
Well, yeah. Right. We'll move on to that, because I think that's going down a scary, scary hole. Right.
That's what they say.
Question 3. Just stop oil at it again this week. They interrupted the Wimbledon match with orange paint, but what else did they interrupt the match with? Was it A, jigsaw pieces, B, strips of bacon, or C, hundreds of keys? Oh, Sam Dowler again, you're so slow, Lizzie.
I don't know this one. Hundreds of keys.
Hundreds of keys, Lizzie Gundy.
It's the first one, A.
Which is what?
Lots of, jigsaw pieces. Thank you.
All right. They wouldn't put bacon on the S. It is actually, Lizzie Cundy's right. Jigsaw pieces, it's 2-1. Question 4. True or false? A river in Japan was turned purple this week. Lizzie Cundy.
True.
True?
I'm going to say true as well.
You say true? Well, it's false. That's pretty stupid of you, Sam.
I know,
Why did you do that?
Why? You just had to say
One person says one thing, say the other
because
thing.
I actually genuinely thought it was true.
50-50. Well, now you know what your brain is.
It's mush.
It's false. It actually turned green. The chemicals used in making the bath salts were dumped into the river in Osaka, Japan, turning the river green. Final question. An Aldi shopper got quite the surprise this week when he found a strange creature in a bag of broccoli. But what was that creature? Was it A, a deadly spider, B, a snake, or C, a baby Lizzie Cundy.
Snake.
Snake, Sam Dowler?
Well, it was a snake, but now I have to say a spider.
No, it's a snake. Snake, just like you. On today's show, I've been asked, is it time for the BBC to stop expecting the public to pay? According to the Twitter poll, 92% of you said yes and 8% of you say no. Thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, thank you very much. And political commentator Sam Dowler. And a huge thank you to you at home for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast, where we continue to see some heavy showers, possible thunderstorms through the rest of the weekend, and still fairly warm and humid across the UK. Looking at the bigger picture, in this area of low pressure just sits to the west of us, allowing that warm air to come up from the near continent, developing those shower clouds and thunderstorms across the UK right through the rest of the weekend. And we still have thundery showers across the north and the east this Saturday evening. Could be some local disruption. Some longer spells of rain for Scotland, northeast England for a time too into the early hours. But for many, it will become quieter. There'll be clear spells, but still fairly warm and humid tonight, particularly in the east, lows of 17 or 18 degrees, whilst the west will be a little fresher. Sunday morning, a bright start for many. Cloud and outbreaks of showery rain pushing into southeast England, and the rain across Scotland takes its time to clear here. And then it's a day of sunny spells and heavy showers once more. Showers most frequent across western parts of the UK. Some thunderstorms could lead to some local disruption, particularly parts of Northern Ireland into Wales, southwest England too. And temperatures overall a little lower compared to Saturday, highs around 25 or 26 Celsius. Into the evening time, thunderstorms continue to push their way northwards, but they will ease by the end of the day. And then overnight, we're looking at clear skies once more. And temperatures just dropping a little lower compared to recent nights, but still towns and cities 13 to 15 Celsius. So it means a bright start for many on Monday morning. Plenty of sunny spells, thicker cloud across the north of Scotland, and then all eyes to the west of this area. Low pressure starts to bring in more showery rain into western parts, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, the West Country at times too. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunny spells and